Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us here today. I'm Carolina Albernas, CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce based in Toronto, and on behalf of the Organizers Committee, I would like to welcome you all to the second day of the first Brazil-Canada Agriculture Forum, organized in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce Brazil-Canada based in São Paulo. I'll be your MC today, together with Paulo de Castro Reis, Chief Officer for Institutional Relations and Business Affairs at the CCBC. Just a few housekeeping rules. Speakers will be available to answer questions after all presentations are done. All questions should be asked through the Q&A box located in the bottom of your screen. So we've allowed attendees to upvote and answer questions to incentivize positive discussions. So feel free to add any comments and questions throughout the presentations, and we'll do our best to address all the points raised during the Q&A session in the end of the program. Without further ado, I would like to invite Peter Hawkins, co-chair of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce and managing director at the Mellowhawk Logistics, for the opening remarks. So Peter.
Thank you very much, Carolina. As co-chair of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, the BCCC with Dan Rosica, and in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce Brasil-Canada CCBC in Brazil, Obrigado Team CCBC, and the support from Global Affairs Canada through the Embassy of Canada in Brasilia and the Brazilian Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Supply, I am pleased to welcome you to the second session of the first Brazil-Canada Agricultural Forum, focusing on trade in the cultural sector. But first, even in our virtual world, we still have our feet on the land, and I would like to acknowledge that this land where I am is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, home to the Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. It is also my great pleasure to thank our BCC sponsors, Valley, who is our platinum sponsor, Export Development Canada, our gold sponsor, Brookfield, Linden Mining, Zescon Berrieux, the Toronto Stock Exchange, and TSX Venture Exchange, Port St. John, Nutrient, Mellowhawk Logistics, and Fairfax. It is with your sponsorship that great events like this can happen. Et parce que beaucoup de nos participants sont francophones et que l'agriculture est une grosse affaire au Québec et dans la province constitutionnellement bilingue de Nouveau-Brunswick, ainsi que dans la région francophone de l'Île-de-France-Édouard, de la Nouvelle-Écosse, de l'Ontario, de Manitoba et plus encore, je veux leur souhaiter la bienvenue. Il existe de nombreuses opportunités entre le Canada et le Brésil et nous serons heureux de vous aider. Bienvenue. Hoje vamos nos concentrar nas oportunidades de comércio bilateral de tendências futuras com percepções entre os palestrantes. Estão Marcos Jank, professor senior de agronegócio global de INSPER, Lígia Dutra, chefe de relação internacional de CNA, Confederação de Agricultura e Pecuária do Brasil, Gustavo Zentner, presidente e CEO de Interpac, Global Trade and Investment, Robert O'Sullivan, vice-presidente de vendas para as Américas de Clearwater Seafoods, LP, Bruce Rogers, diretor executivo de CIFA, Shannon Blanchard, gerente de desenvolvimento de carga em St. John, Port St. John, and Arno Mello, presidente de Mellowhawk Logistics, Paulo Rezende de Castro Reis, director de relações institucionais de CCBC, Carolina Albanaz, CEO de BCC, Marcelo Correa, CEO de Marcelo Correa Consulting, Flavio Ferreira, CEO de BR4 Trade Corporation, important distribuidor, oh my goodness, de produtos alimentos brasileiros do Canada. Sydney Bratt, gerente geral Gourmand Alimentos, John Kirkup, gerente marketing de vendas de DN Logística Internacional, et Margaret Johnson, ministério de Agricultura, Aquacultura et Pesca de New Brunswick. Today we'll focus on bilateral trade opportunities and future trends in panels featuring a keynote by Marcos Jank, Senior Professor of Global Agribusiness to INSPER, and Lígia Dutra, Head of International Relations at CNA, the Brazilian Confederation of Agriculture and Livestock, Gustavo Zentner, President and CEO of Interpac, Global Trade and Investment, Paulo de Castro Reis, Chief Officer of Institutional Relations and Business Affairs at CCBC, Carolina Albanaz, CEO at Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, Marcelo Correa, CEO at Marcelo Correa Consulting, focusing on market entry, Flavio Ferreira, CEO at BR4 Trade Corporation, a key distributor of Brazilian products in Canada. And of course, I dropped the thing. Here we go. Rob O'Sullivan, Vice President of Sales for the Americas at Clearwater Seafoods, which really is a Canadian success story. Sydney Bratt, General Manager, Gourmand Alimentos. Arno Mello, President, Mellowhawk Logistics. John Kirkup, Sales and Marketing at DN and Logistica International, long an advocate of Brazil-Canada trade. Bruce Rogers, Executive Director at CIFA. Shannon Blanchard, Honorary Brazilian and Cargo Development Manager at Fort St. John. And of course, the Honorable Margaret Johnson, Minister of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries of New Brunswick. Welcome all. I'm delighted to be here and to be part of this organization, and I'm really thrilled to hear what everybody has to say. Without further delay, let's get to it. Back to you, Carolina.
Thank you, Peter. So we're going to do a quick switch on the program, and thank you so much for your words. I would like to invite now Lígia Dutra, Head for International Relations at CNA, the Brazilian Confederation of Agriculture and Livestock, to talk a little bit about the opportunities she sees for trade between Brazil and Canada, and a little bit of overview of what CNA does. So Lígia, stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I would like to thank you and Peter for the invitation to be here today. And I want to extend my compliment to the Brazilian Embassy in Canada, especially in the person of Ambassador Pedro Borio. I'll have to share screen here with my presentation. Just 1 minute. Here, yeah. Well, before I start, I just want to say that to express my contentment to share this panel with Gustavo Zentner. It's the first time that we'll meet. And I think it will be very interesting to hear his perspectives on trends and opportunities for Brazil, Canada in agriculture. So before I start, I would like just to quickly present the Brazilian Confederation of Agriculture and Livestock, CNA, the organization that I represent. We are a farmers organization. We have about 2 million members across the country. Farmers engaged in a variety of cultures, from major export products such as coffee and soybeans to tropical fruits like mangoes and acai. Acai is a berry from the Amazon. And well, just to start then the presentation, we'll show you some figures on our bilateral trade. As you can see here, Brazil has exported $530 million in agricultural products to Canada, which represented 12.5% of the country's total export. Here you will see the figures. And Canada exported to Brazil 106 million, representing 5.5% of its total exports to Brazil. From our side, the main products were raw sugar, green coffee, poultry, and soluble coffee. As you can see, raw sugar took 50% of the share, showing that we have plenty of space to diversify our sales to Canada and to increase the trade balance as a whole. I believe we can keep exporting commodities such as green coffee or raw sugar to Canada because we are a reliable supplier for the Canadian industry. But if we look into new possibilities, we'll see that Brazil could have a more substantial presence in Canada, selling high quality food products, especially for the final consumers. And that's why I will focus the presentation in niche products. And I'm sure Gustavo Zentner will have a presentation that will be complementary to this one. The first product that I want to present you is vegetables. Leaf vegetables such as lettuce, kale, and spinach are heavily imported in Canada. Of course, I'm not suggesting that we will be exporting these fresh products by plane to Canada. It would be incredibly expensive and logistics could be a nightmare. Well, later we'll have a panel on logistics and then we'll see how to do it. But nevertheless, it is feasible to think about exporting prepared vegetables directly to final consumers. But in order to do that, Brazilian companies have to pay attention in trends to trends in the Canadian consumer market. As we can see here, research in Canadian supermarkets showed an outstanding number of vegetable products available with specific attributes. those attributes are valued by local consumers. For example, kosher, microwavable, organic, easy to use, as well as others. And we have to pay attention to the consumer's preferences. If we wanna sell, we have to pay attention what consumers really want to buy. So that's important when you go to the Canadian market. And just like vegetables, many fruits consumed by Canadians are imported. So the second product that I want to bring your attention is fruit. The most consumed fruit in Canada is banana. Banana is the most consumed fruit everywhere in the world. But in Canada, you have 15 kilos available to eat per year. Just for comparison, you will see that in Brazil, we have over 25 kilos per year. But banana is not the only tropical fruit Canadians enjoy. Consumption of mangoes, melon, lime, avocado have been rising in Canada, and we do export those. Brazil doesn't export as much as Peru or Colombia, but farmers are investing a lot in the sector in Brazil, and step by step, we're amplifying our share of exports and gaining new markets. So in the last 3 years, import of mangoes rose almost 6% a year, and Brazil exported 9,000 tons last year, which shows that we have room to improve our presence in Canada with fruits. And just changing a little bit sectors here, from fruits and vegetables, we go to another really nice sector, really nice product, sparkling wine. Probably the first thing that you'll think when I talk about sparkling wine from Brazil is, do you have vineyards in Brazil? Because it's not that well known. The product is not well known in the international market. But yes, we do. And vineyards in the south and northeast of Brazil are increasing production of sparkling wine, actually. And it's also growing in quality and achieving a quite good reputation in the international market. We export around $2 million. Last year, we exported $2 million to the world, about 700,000 liras. It's not much, and mainly goes to the United States, but it's growing, and that's why I think we have opportunities also in Canada. Canada imports a lot of sparkling wine, especially from the European Union. 90% of share comes from the European Union. And the Canadian high demand offers an opportunity to expand Brazilian sparkling wine in the region. If we go to the next sector, the next product that I think we could have some opportunity as a niche product, it's tilapia or some peter fish. In 2019, Brazilian production of tilapia reached 323,000 tons. Our country is not a traditional exporter of the product, but the continuous growth in production and the significant investments made by the industry to reach international export standards makes me believe that tilapia has a potential to expand within the international market, including Canada, of course. And just going to the last product that I would like to highlight in this presentation, I will talk about coffee. When I was preparing the presentation, I discovered that love for coffee is something shared by both Brazilians and Canadians. We found out that 71% of Canadians aged between 18 and 79 drink coffee. According to the Canadian Coffee Association, coffee is the most consumed beverage in the country of tap water and tea. That was really impressive to me. And all coffee sold in Canada is, of course, imported. Canada has neither national production nor import tariff for coffee, and that's important to highlight. There is no import tariff for coffee, which makes it one of the few countries in the world where tariffs aren't a barrier for Brazil to export value-added coffee. That means no tariff escalation, and that's it's really different from the rest of the world. When we deal coffee in the rest of the world, you have a lot of tariff escalation with the EU, our main market. If you add value to the coffee, you pay more tariffs. So that's why we usually only sell green beans, green coffee. And well, what's the challenge then to achieve the Canadian market? The main challenge is to make Brazilian coffee available for final consumers. And a vital improvement for coffee, for the coffee sector, is to develop brands and to be recognized by consumers as a high quality product. Here, one information we got during this, when I was organizing this presentation, was that Canadians start to drink more coffee homemade. It was a consequence of the pandemic. And then if people want to prepare their coffee at home, we need to make coffee available for consumers. They need to find coffee at the supermarket. They need to be able to prepare at their houses. And for that, you need to work in coffee brands. People need to know that coffee is coming from Brazil and that you can find high quality coffee from Brazil. These are just a few examples of sectors in the Brazilian agriculture that I believe we have opportunities to explore more in the Canadian market. Niche products, of course, but those products have high impact in the Brazilian agriculture because mainly small and medium scale farmers are involved in the production of those products. And then they have a positive social impact in the Brazilian agriculture. And my last slide actually is about a project that we are developing at CNA. It will be the last thing I will say before I give the floor to Gustavo Zentner. This project is a trade promotion project. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a trade promotion project that we launched last year together with Apex Brazil, the trade promotion agency in Brazil. And right now we have around 800 companies enrolled in a variety of activities in this project, from capacity building to soft landing in the Chinese market. And these 3 companies that you can see here in the slide, they are already exporting to Canada. AR Paris exported peaches for the first time to Canada last year. Apiário Sol is a traditional exporter of honey and propolis. And Smart Fruits, as the name says, export fruits to Canada. And it's expanding their operation in Canada this year. So my opinion is that maybe 3 out of 800 is maybe only few companies, and that's true because sometimes I think we have a problem that is a lack of knowledge of the Canadian market. It works actually both ways, in my opinion. But another thing that might help us, not help, but actually another thing that I think makes Brazilian companies not look to the Canadian market as they should is that when you have, trade relations with big market, with a great power of attraction like the United States is for Canada or China is for Brazil, it is easy to become blind to new opportunities. And I believe we need to focus more on our bilateral relation. And that's why at CNA, we strongly support the free trade agreement, the FTA, and the negotiation between Mercosur and Canada. I think it would draw attention to our bilateral relation. It would increase the trade balance and could benefit both countries for sure. So those are just few products and sectors that I think we can work better in our bilateral relation, and we can have opportunities in the Canadian market. And to finish this presentation, I just want to invite you to visit the website of our trade promotion project. It's just here, I don't know if it will open here. Maybe you will see it, this website. You will, in this website, you'll find food companies ready to export high quality products from Brazil, from small and medium scale farmers. And I'm quite sure that Canadian consumers will enjoy it. Thank you so much, Carolina. And Gustavo, please, it's with you.
Thank you, Lígia. Thank you for the presentation. And just to give you like a quick comment before Gustavo comes in, I think that's the main point, right? Diversification, I think, is to help Brazilian understands all the opportunities that Canada has to offer and vice versa. And I think that's the main point of events like this. So thank you so much for your presentation and for your support. Gustavo, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to meet with all of you. Lígia, you did a great job, and I am really concerned if I'm going to do justice to the wonderful approach you've taken to trends and opportunities. I'll do my best, but it's certainly a pleasure to join you. Before I proceed, Carolina, can you just confirm, or Peter, that you are seeing a screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, we are.
Okay, fantastic. I want to add to Peter's comments and welcoming remarks. I am very moved by the fact that both federal governments and our respective embassies and associations and chambers and the wonderful array of companies that are joining us today show interest in this sector. So please indulge me. I'm not going to acknowledge anyone else participating or sponsoring the event. I think Peter did a great job on that. I'd rather focus on the topic today of trends and opportunities for our two countries. My name is Gustavo Zedner. I'm the president of Interpod. That stands for International Point of Commerce. We do global trade and investment opportunities and help organizations grow. I thought I'll share with you a little bit of the data in terms of what the country of Canada represents. I'll show a map. I'll focus on some of the areas on the prairies. I'll talk about trends. I'll talk about opportunities, and I'll wrap up my talk hopefully within the next few minutes. Just for our friends in Brazil, bem-vindos, é prazer para mim, para a gente contar com a participação de vocês. Nós brindamos serviços em português, logicamente, e prazer para nós contribuir com o conhecimento que nós temos nesse mercado. Canada, in general terms, represent in agriculture, in livestock, and marine life sectors, with 2.3 million jobs. Almost 7,000 small, medium-sized, and large-sized enterprises that are active. FDI, or foreign direct investment, is a significant way for this country to grow and to engage with countries around the world. So there are in excess of 80 projects now. 79 were registered in 5 years, as you can see. In terms of our positioning worldwide, Brazil and Canada really are leading forces, both in North America and in South America, and as it relates to almost our overall mandate to feed the world. And I think that's part of why we wanted to get together today and reflect on what else could we do together to help each other, to support each other. I am speaking to you today from our headquarters in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. This is what is called part of the Prairie Provinces. You see them here highlighted in orange. These 3 provinces are Manitoba, capital city Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. You might be familiar with some of the leading factors and crops that we have in these areas, but I wanted to focus a little bit specifically with 3 examples that each represent the 3 provinces in the prairies. Focusing on Saskatchewan, some of the top products that they produce for the world, anywhere from $6 billion. Every time for our Brazilian friends you see a B, that's 6,000 million or $6 billion worth of potash industry development and export. The key areas that are of interest to us today for Saskatchewan are wheat and canola seed productions with impressive 4.5 and almost $4 billion worth of production activities. Together, Manitoba and Saskatchewan represents almost 84% of the arable land in our country. And together, these provinces represent some of the most fertile farmers' land in North America, with access to primarily more than 59 different countries through 14 trade agreements. So Lydia, my colleague, mentioned the Mercosur. Obviously, I'll talk about that later on. Within context, already for a province like Saskatchewan with 1.2, 1.3 million people, inhabitants, $980 million worth of export activities already go to Brazil. We import a small fraction of that. That trade imbalance opens up incredible opportunities for us. One of the comments that it was mentioned before was the seasonality of 12 months and the wonderful weather and climate conditions in Brazil, whereas all of you are familiar with our weather conditions in Canada. We don't have the 12-month period for growth and production as you do in Brazil. So that is one of the opportunities that we ought to keep in mind. And I'm going to talk about that with specific focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. The other province that I mentioned before is Manitoba. On the food and beverages side, Manitoba is leading the chart Canada-wide in terms of food and beverages processing. I have the pleasure of serving as a national advisor to a manufacturers association, and we realized many years ago that food development and food and beverages in particular are not only part of the processing side of manufacturing, but also a way of creating value. What we need to do, you and I, is figure out what is it that we do today that could be value add revenue generation in Canada, and what some of those services might be that some of your companies in Brazil can do. So your production costs are typically lower in Brazil than in Canada. Our technology deployment is typically more advanced in Canada than in Brazil in general terms. Let's spend time together after today's presentation looking at opportunities to get some of the raw materials from Canada, which we already export to Brazil, and get some of the innovation and the ingenuity of Brazilian enterprises to deploy those solutions in Brazil. That's what we call value add. To give you an example, look at the meat processing side. The top three of these ones are 42% representing the meat processing side, including something that I hope will catch many of you by surprise, and I hope that's the case. I'll mention that in the next slide. The next one is, in general terms, grain and oil seed production. So we produce phenomenal quality of vegetable, non-GMO, crushed oils in Canada. Those are further processed when we export them to other markets, and they become ingredients for innovative solutions in the food sector in other markets, and including Brazil. The third one is represented by 20%. This is on the innovation technology side. Some of these opportunities are represented by what we call foreign direct investment, or FDI. I decided to choose some of the already established international companies with operations in Canada that export phenomenal quality poultry and meats, hogs, of course, cattle, to the US, to Europe, and now through specialty cuts and value add into countries like Brazil through South America. If you picked up on one of the slides that Lee just showed, there was a reference to kosher, and kosher and halal certification are very important as an opportunity for joint development. So what are the trends that we're seeing? So basically I highlighted 6. These are trends where our company is fairly active. More specifically, I decided to focus on 3 that are fairly current for us in our business activity and also relate Canada-Brazil relations. Canada has a very strong integrated food supply chain system, and over the last year and a half, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it became very evident that having a robust supply chain system with transportation within the country and abroad is fundamental. We have a very strong sector that supports technology deployment and development. As it relates to Brazil and technology sourcing, one of our clients produce agricultural components for tractor and implement. There is a similar product and similar technology in Brazil. However, the way that the piece of equipment and the components are manufactured and designed in Canada seem to have a little bit of an advantage. So we looked at a significant manufacturer in Brazil, in Nas Terras Gaúchas, in the southern Brazil, to look for someone that could, under a technology transfer and royalty program, design, improve, and nationalize some of those components to be sold in Brazil and eventually throughout the Mercosur. That type of collaboration and technology sourcing, as an example, opens up opportunities for us countries and companies in our respective countries to look for co-investment opportunities, technology transfer, and JV, joint ventures. The other one had to do with a pilot plant. On the technology transfer and collaboration, we look at a company that they actually invented a new sector, which is currently being commercialized in Brazil to provide insurance, crop insurance, as an insurance industry in Brazil didn't quite have something that could be offered to farmers based on technology deployment and using artificial intelligence and algorithms. This created a fantastic opportunity for FDI, foreign direct investment, from a Canadian company to open up a sales and IT platform in Brazil. They've already acquired a few small businesses, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, with Salesforce into the arable land in Brazil, and are now rolling out this type of solution. This is another example of where we identify trends and deploy them or develop them into opportunities for joint collaboration. I wanted to highlight that as it relates to Brazil and Canada, one of the things that I know both of the countries have in common is government's commitment to incentives. In the case of Canada, there is a very strong financial system. The banking system in particular is quite aggressive, supporting industry development. There is direct access to government. There is a perception of no red tape and no bureaucracy, no corruption practices in Canada, which makes it very attractive for companies from around the world to come to this country. And in turn, it helped Canadian companies learn how to do business with countries like Brazil, and in environments where we can bring financing, innovation, and technology, and partner up with Brazilian-based businesses. I wanted to focus very quickly on three international multi-million-dollar investments. The first one is in Manitoba, in a place called Portage La Prairie. I happen to be in this city every second week to supervise other activities for direct investors that have a plant for which we are responsible. This is, for those of you that are not familiar, a plant-based protein which is booming in Canada. We are a leading force Canada-wide to attract and develop foreign investment and to develop, in this case, the largest, at the global scale, the largest protein-based, protein-enabled technologies. It's a French company called Roquette, and they have an impressive $600 million deployment of foreign investment to develop pea protein facilities that are going to integrate Canada-wide, service the US, and already in discussions for export markets, including South America. Other ones in protein-based, and this is what I mentioned before, have to do with meatless production of meat-like, meat-flavored facilities. So being a province like Alberta that is known for a great quality beef, myself, I still stick to the gauchos and the great churrascos that I have learned to enjoy in Brazil, but their counterpart in Canada from Alberta is not only on the beef side, it's also on the meatless side. So a UK-based organization or company called Meatless Farms have developed a protein-based plant that feels like, looks like, and tastes like beef, yet is completely plant-based. And I think that shows a little bit of the research, innovation, and also opportunity to service a new growing market. And the last one has to do with deploying technologies. Pardon me. On the technology side, I chose a company out of just South Dakota here in North America on the US side that has looked at Canada to test their technologies and the ag-tech agriculture with finer precision. And I know that Brazil has made incredible and rapid deployment of investment and local domestic innovation, bringing precision farming into the Brazilian farmland. So this is a perfect example of how some of those activities are done. They are done with the support of different levels of government, federal and provincial. So in Canada, you would have, in Saskatchewan, for example, an innovation center. It's what's called the Food Product and Processing Development Center. In Manitoba, you have the Food Development Center in Manitoba that brings in universities, and small companies that have unique access to market and new product, but they don't have the technology. And together they come to cooperate through significant investments from the government perspective and also from angel investors and presenters. So capital access is important. I'm going to move to the last part of my talk, which is related to opportunities. Folks, no matter what we do, we have to focus on three areas: jobs, food creation as an option, and then innovation. Long gone are the days where you want to compete simply by selling more of the same stuff that other neighboring countries do. So I think Brazil and Canada, based on co-investment and trust, have a phenomenal opportunity to support each other in the following areas. Number one, I would highlight investment and strategic on technology deployment. I mentioned two examples before. The opportunities for those investments have to do with sharing on the technology advancement of that, looking at recognizing and promoting the strength of what the Brazilian brand is and what Canada has to offer at the international scale. And perfect example of that is looking at more products coming in from Brazil into Canada, using reverse trade markets, taking Canadian products into Brazil. But then again, looking at, for example, a Brazilian product that has Canadian ingredients from the Canadian prairies that are further processed in Brazil with Brazilian technology, sometimes with Canadian investments in Brazil, and then they become part of, for example, granola bars or nutraceuticals or nutritional value add products in Brazil with a packaging in Portuguese, commercialized and distributed in Brazil by Brazilian trading houses. The last one has to do with R&D and data management. This seems to be a very big one now. I mentioned one example of this Manitoba-based business that it's recently launched their IPO successfully, and it has tremendous opportunities to grow by developing new solutions to market in the insurance market, looking at weather conditions, deploying technologies from Canada, from Brazil that are deployed to market through Canadian and through Brazilian technicians in Brazil. I think that on the macro level, the opportunities at the countryside are, number one, looking at the youth population of Brazil. I can tell you both governments are working very successfully at promoting the talent that Brazilian professionals have, especially in Industry 4.0 and IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, IoT, Internet of Things, obviously in the larger understanding and spectrum of manufacturing, but more specifically, labor, skills, and ethics. And from that perspective, the last one that I'm going to suggest here is access to capital. There is an increased number of Canadian companies that are investing in Brazil that want to have a local presence, that want to be associated with a reputable Brazilian enterprise. And because of that, they look for those partnerships. In sum, basically, there are three messages for our audience here today: foreign direct investment and foreign direct ownership. We typically work for companies that are outside of Canada as your ears, your eyes, and your hands on the ground. So, for example, when you have a Brazilian entity that wants to invest or expand, look for a particular building, commercialization channels into Canada, that's a service where we're hands-on involved with our Brazilian clients. For industry, Canadian or Brazilian clients, we develop and deliver services on market access channel. We look for business and trade opportunities, typically fostered by M&A or strategic alliances. We have 3 years ago acquired one of the fourth largest silo manufacturer in Brazil, and it's now neighbor to the first Canadian-based silo manufacturer in Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul that produces Canadian and Brazilian technology for the benefit of Brazilian farmers. And the last one for our guests that are part of EDO, Economic Development Organizations, not-for-profit and associations. We partner with you by conducting confidential research, access to market and representation, and helping you take your mandate into action. With that, I'm looking forward to some Q&A and discussion. Once again, I'm so thrilled to have joined you today, and thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Lígia, for your presentation. As you can see, like Canada and Brazil, there's a lot of opportunity, especially for the export of Canadian technology into Brazil. And then we'll go further ahead into the presentation, talking a little bit about more niche products. So thank you, Gustavo. I don't see, we'll For everyone in the audience, please add your questions to the Q&A and we will answer the questions in the end of the program. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Marcos Young. Marcos is Senior Professor of Global Agribusiness at INSPER, Brazilian University. And he will give us his perspective on global challenges for bilateral trade. Marcos, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Carolina. It's a pleasure to be with you here and also to talk and to participate in this event with Ligia and Gustavo and many other experts. I also thank BCCC and the Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá for this opportunity. 10 years ago, I had the chance to spend 2 weeks in Canada giving presentations in several different universities and also visiting the field and also learning about the evolution of Canada agriculture. And I really believe that we have here an opportunity to advance our bilateral relations, not only in trade, but also in many other areas such as investments and technology and innovation and sustainability and many other aspects that are very important for our countries. Let me share with you my presentation. So just a second here to put my presentation here. Can you see in full screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So you asked me to talk a little bit about the global challenges for bilateral trade between Brazil and Canada. I will talk about bilateral trade, but I also talk a little bit about multilateral cooperation, because I really believe that these two countries have a role in terms of, you see, working on the WTO, working in all different international organizations, the climate discussions, the financial system. You see, there are several areas of cooperation that we should increase our relations. And for sure, I also believe that we have a real challenge today in food security, in global food security, and global food safety, especially after the pandemic. So I believe that the areas of cooperation are very large for our countries. So here you have a short bio of myself. I'm not talking about this, but just to mention my bio and my career. But when we start talking about Canada and Brazil, we are talking about two of the most important exporters and producers of agricultural products. Canada is number 5 in world exports, and Brazil is number 3. Canada is number 9 in total agricultural area. Brazil is number 5. So both countries are among the 10 largest exporters and the 10 largest agricultural areas in the world. Canada has a lot of trade agreements, so this is something different in our case here in Brazil. Brazil has very, very little agreements. We have for sure an agreement in Mercosur, but we are lacking other agreements, including with Canada. One of the big possibilities that we have is to work on a trade agreement between Brazil and Canada, or Mercosur and Canada, and this would be very important for both countries. Canada has a strong reputation and differentiation in terms of quality of products, food safety, traceability, a long-term international presence. I've been living 5 years in Asia, and I saw all the promotions that were made by Canada agriculture in Asia. You see, in terms of products, in terms of branding, in terms of value-added products. And I really believe that you are like a benchmark for us, especially in value-added products, that you are now exporting to several countries, as we are too, but we are more commodity-oriented than Canada. You also have a very strong food chain coordination and a regulatory system that's simple and focused. And this is something that we should learn with Canada. You see how to deal with you see a very efficient regulatory system that allow a lot of exports to several countries. Brazil for sure has other advantages. For example, we have a huge availability of natural resources in terms of land, water, and climate conditions, We have also our tropical agriculture system that was improved in the last 40, 50 years with genetic improvement of soybeans and say African grasses and zebu cattle from India. We are today double cropping, so we can produce soy and corn or soy and cotton at the same season without irrigation. We have now a very strong expansion in terms of crop livestock integration, which is the possibility to increase agricultural production in areas of pasture here in Brazil. We have no-till, large-scale farming systems and integrated supply chains. We also have a very strong experience in biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel, and many other products. And we are a very strong commodity-based country. You see, so we have high volumes, low costs, but value added is still a challenge for us. And this is one of the areas that we should work together. Our farmers are young, are very motivated, are very risk takers. And also we have strong internal migrations here in Brazil, especially people moving from the south and southeast of Brazil in the direction of the center west and the center north of the country in the Cerrados areas that we have here. So this is a very strong movement in this country in the last 40 years. And we still have new agricultural frontiers, especially pasture conversions and the areas in the Cerrados of the Northeast. I see much more possibilities of complementarity between our countries than competition. For sure that we are competing in some markets, but I see a lot of complementarities. And the presentations by Ligia and Gustavo just showed how many opportunities we have today to work together. So this is the situation of the world. So the world have a very strong surplus of trade surplus in terms of agriculture. In the Americas, in South America, is growing very fast. In North America, with US and Canada, and East Europe and Russia also are increasing very much their trade surpluses in agriculture. And we have a very strong deficit coming more and more in countries like Africa, Middle East, and Asia. So this is the balance of the world. So the Americas are having strong surpluses more and more, and Asia and Africa and Middle East have very strong deficits. And I believe that both countries, Brazil and Canada, have a role in terms of supplying food, supplying commodities to Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And this is one of the areas of cooperation that I'm going to talk to you a little later. This is the Brazilian trade balance. So the agri-food sector represent the most important source of exports for Brazil, and also a very strong trade balance here. If we didn't have agriculture, it would be very difficult for us, because the other sectors are having trade deficits for a long time. But in agriculture, we are increasing our exports, including after the pandemic. If we look, for example, the Brazilian exports today, we are doing $101 billion of agricultural, agri-food exports here in Brazil. And even after the pandemic, our exports have been growing 5% in general, but 10% to China and 15 to 30% to Southeast Asia, India, and even Africa. So we are more and more concentrated in markets in the emerging economies of the Eastern Hemisphere of the world. Our exports are very concentrated in soybean, meat, forest products, sugar, corn, coffee, cotton. So these are the main products that we have. And you can see here that we are now diversifying from a very strong dependence on soy to, for example, cotton and corn, because we are planting cotton and corn as a second crop in the same areas of soybeans. So this possibility to double crop, to produce in the same area soy and corn or soy and cotton, is something that has been very important for Brazil. And today we are the #1 in the world in soybeans, but #2 in corn, and #2 in cotton. And for example, these activities are growing very, very strongly here in Brazil. For sure that we also have coffee, which used to be the main activity in our exports, but today has lost a lot of importance. And we are also growing meat exports, and you see forest products and sugar and ethanol. Canada is exporting $65 billion, is #5 in the world after US, Europe, Brazil, and China, but also have been growing a lot exports, but it's a little different from the Brazilian exports. You have, for example, fish products that we are very small. You have vegetables, you have pulses, for example. You're a very strong exporter of pulses. And you have many other differentiated products in your export. So Canada is a very big player in the world, and I would say much more diversified in terms of products than Brazil. Brazil is more concentrated in just a few commodities, and Canada have many other products in your exports. In our case, what we see here is a very strong mutual dependence between Brazil and China. You see, Brazilian exports to China used to be $1 billion in 2000, and now these exports reach $36 billion. We have a 20% a year growth since 2000, and it's really huge, the importance of China for Brazil today. China is the #1 importer of soybeans, of cotton, of beef, chicken, pork, sugar, and cellulose from Brazil. So we are having a real big increase of our exports to China. Brazil is today the first supplier of China in agri-food products, and also other countries in Asia beyond China. And what we see here is a reduction of our exports to Europe, and we are moving our destination markets to Asia. So this is the movement that we are seeing very strongly in our country. You see here that China, Hong Kong, and the rest of Asia represent more than 50% of our exports. And the Middle East is 12%, which is a very traditional market for us. Canada is much more dependent on the US in terms of exports and also in terms of imports. So Canada, the US represents 40% of Canada exports and represent 25% of Canada imports. So this is because of the NAFTA agreements, the USCMA agreements, and also because of all the frontiers that we have with the US. And I believe that this is exactly the area that we should work together in terms of diversifying, in terms of increasing Canada imports and exports to South America, and reducing a little bit this dependence on the US market. For sure, the US is a huge market, but I believe that we can also see many opportunities between Brazil and Canada, and also between Canada and other countries in South America. This is the Brazil-Canada agri-food balance here. So the agri-food trade. Brazil is exporting today around $600 million to Canada, and Brazil is importing a little more than $100 million. So it's really very small, our bilateral trade. You see, and not only it's still very small, but it's not growing. So it's not going very well. If we look at the last 10 years, we see a reduction in our exports to Canada, and also we see here a reduction of our imports from Canada. You see, so there's a huge opportunity here to work in terms of increasing our total trade, so imports and exports in both directions. Our exports to Canada are concentrated in sugar, coffee, forest products, poultry, some fruits and beef. You see, but it's really not enough in my opinion. We should work much more to have more trade between our countries, and especially diversifying the opportunities. See, not only working on commodities, but also increasing value-added products. You see, differentiated products between our two countries. Brazil is importing from Canada wheat, pulses, paper and cellulose, and some feeds here. You see, so we see here that that there is a huge opportunity to increase exports and to increase imports in both directions. So this would be one of the targets, I believe, from this event, is to explore all the possibilities that we have, knowing that in the last 10 years we are seeing a reduction of trade between our countries in agriculture. One of the main topics from our countries, one of the main strong factors of our competitiveness is exactly the productivity that we have been growing in the last years. So if we see here, Brazil and Canada have a very strong increase of total productivity in terms of land, labor, and capital efficiency since 1980. But in the case of Brazil, in the last 10 years, you can see here in the last 10 years what happened. You see a huge increase in our productivity levels, and this is exactly because of the possibility to double crop, to do crop livestock integration. You see, so this new model that we are seeing in the Brazilian Center West is the main reason that Brazil had this very strong growth of productivity in the last 10 and especially in the last 10 years. In terms of natural resources, Brazil have more available land and also more water compared to Canada. See, Canada is one of the big countries in terms of arable land and water, but Brazil, because of the tropical conditions and because of the possibility to expand agriculture in the tropical cerrados, we see here is still a very important potential in terms, a very huge potential in terms of having land and having water for production. In our country, the movement of growth is from agriculture to pastures. You see, we have 85 million hectares of agriculture, and we have 175 million hectares of pastures. And this is exactly the area that we are seeing what we call crop livestock integration, which is the possibility to produce in part of the pastures, I would say around 50 million hectares. We can move agriculture to pasture areas, and you can, in this case, produce more soy and corn and wheat and you see coffee, sugarcane, and we can also integrate this with beef cattle. For example, we can, in some areas of the country, produce soy and corn in the summer and also produce cattle in the winter. You see, so this kind of possibilities is exactly because of the tropical conditions that allow us to produce the whole year. You see, we don't have a cold climate, we don't have restrictions in terms of sunlight, and exactly because of that, we are seeing this expansion. For sure that we also have a big issue here in Brazil, which is deforestation in the Amazon. Right now, there's a lot of talks everywhere in the world about the situation that we are still seeing 1 million hectares of deforestation in the Amazon, and we are And we are working here to reduce this level of deforestation, especially illegal deforestation, with the implementation of the forest code, which is a very modern forest code and very strict, and also in terms of the regularization of the land titles, which is still a problem in the north of Brazil. But in general, the expansion of agriculture will be from agriculture to pasture areas here in Brazil in the next years. And now with the strong prices of soy and corn in the world, we are seeing this expansion happening very strongly. This is the situation today of our country in terms of, you see, increase in productivity in beef production. And we are also seeing at the same time an increase of double cropping with 15 million hectares, and also integrated systems that are reaching 17 million hectares. And these integrated crop livestock systems could reach 50 million hectares in the next decade here in Brazil. So this is the movement that we are seeing. We still have this agricultural frontier happening in some states in the northeast part of the country, and also we are seeing this expansion of agriculture in pasture areas, which is something that we are learning very fast how to do it. The other big movement here in Brazil is something that in Canada you have, but in Brazil it used to be a problem for us, which is the expansion of railroads and waterways in Brazil. If you look Brazil today, you see that the main areas of grains here in Brazil, in the center west of the country, in Mato Grosso, in Goiás, and in the states of the Northeast Cerrados here in Maranhão, Piauí, and Bahia, and Tocantins, you see that we used to have only roads reaching those areas. And from Mato Grosso to the ports, it's around 2,000 kilometers, and 2,000 kilometers that we use to transport grains and to transport sugar and other products by truck. And what we are seeing right now happening here in this country with very strong investments is the possibility to build 3 big railroads here. So the so-called Ferro Norte here that comes from Santos to Lucas do Rio Verde, the integration east-west that will happen here with FICO and FIOL. And we are also discussing the possibility to have Ferrogrão here, which is a railroad that will come from Mato Grosso up to the river ports here in Pará, and then we can move by the Amazon River up to Europe and other regions of the world. So this is a combination of roads, railways here in red, and waterways here in the north of Brazil. We also have other possibilities in terms of river, but the main investments today are happening in big railroads, and also Canada has a lot of experience in very strong railroads. But in our case, in Brazil, this is very new. We used to have good railroads in the past, 100 years ago, but we've been working much more in roads than in railroads. And now we are moving to railroads finally, which will be very important for the costs, transportation costs, especially here in the center west of the country. In terms of the world, so we see here what I just mentioned to you, which is that the Americas have strong surpluses in terms of agriculture. We also see countries with huge potential to do agriculture in East Europe and Russia and others. Australia for sure, you see, but this area of the world will have huge deficits of food, because in this area of the world we see a huge population growth, and at the same time we have a very important per capita income growth in countries like China, Southeast Asia, and in the future in South Asia, in India and other countries. So because of this increased revenue coming in these regions here, especially in Asia, we are going to see more and more possibilities of increasing trade between our countries and Asia. One of the most impressive studies that I've been seeing in the last year is this study that compares the cost of a healthy diet, you see, in different parts of the world. So a healthy diet costs 3 to 10% of the family income, median family income in Europe, in Canada, in the US. But when it comes to Brazil, the cost goes to 10 to 55%. In Brazil, is 17%. But when we look at the situation of Africa and Asia, the cost of a healthy food, which means a balanced food, you see, I'm not talking about only about carbs and tubers, but I'm talking about, you see, protein and vegetables, and also fruits, etc. So if we have a combination of a balanced plate of food, we can see here that in Africa and in Asia, several countries have very high costs of food compared to the family incomes. So this is a challenge for the world today, you see, is to improve nutrition and improve the diversification of the food, and for sure to reduce the cost of the food in these countries. And one of the ways to have more affordability of commodities and food would be trade. You see, trade is still very, very complicated in the world for several commodities. There's huge protectionism, huge tariffs and non-tariff barriers. And this is one of the reasons that you see Brazil and Canada should work together to give other opportunities for countries that are having very important growth of population and also per capita incomes. This study estimates that 1.5 billion people do not have access to healthy diets in Africa and in Asia. So this is one of the areas that we should cooperate, is really increasing the possibilities to export products to these parts of the world. For example, when we look at the meat consumption in the world, you can see here that in Canada, in Brazil, in US, in Europe, we are talking about a meat consumption of 100 kilos, around 80 to more than 100 kilos per capita a year. And when you look at the situation of Africa and South Asia here, we are talking about less than 20 kilos of meat per capita a year. So there is a huge opportunity here to increase trade and to supply our products to these regions of the world. The other very important aspect is to compare the top net exporters and the top net importers. You see, so even knowing that China is today a huge market for us, but we are more concentrated in the world in terms of net exporters of agriculture and food than net importers. So countries like US, Brazil, Argentina, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Thailand are countries that are very important net exporters of many products. See, for example, palm oil is Indonesia and Malaysia, but when you look grains and you look meat, and you see pulses, etc., there's a huge potential of cooperation between the top exporters of the world. And this is exactly what we should be doing in the WTO and in the FAO Food System Summit that will happen this year, is to increase the cooperation between the top exporters in terms of reducing the protectionism that still exists in agricultural markets. And the big question in the world is how to achieve in the world food security, food safety, nutrition, affordability, and sustainability at the same time. So the answer to this question is trade. You see, trade is what we should increase. You see, and we have a huge potential to increase trade exports to countries that have problems of food security. There are some countries that have huge problems of food safety today, nutritional problems, especially in Africa. You see, there's problems of hunger and bad nutrition in several countries. Affordability, which means making accessible products accessible to the consumers, and huge problems of sustainability, including here in Brazil. We have a big challenge to reduce deforestation. So this is our agenda, is to achieve food security, food safety, nutrition, affordability, sustainability. And one of the answers to reach all those very important factors is exactly reducing barriers, trade barriers, and non-tariff barriers in the world. So just my final remarks, the potential for Canada in bilateral cooperation. This was the question that you asked me to talk here. I believe that first of all, we should work together on fighting global agricultural protectionism, reinforce the WTO. As you all know, the WTO is now being reformed. There's several propositions of reform, and I believe that we should keep the role of the WTO in terms of creating the right rules in terms of trade, not only tariffs and tariffs and quotas, etc., but also and more in non-tariff barriers, because this is one of the big issues that we are facing today. You see lots of restrictions, countries talking about sovereignty in terms of agricultural products. So I think this is a huge agenda for Brazil and Canada, and also creating, working on, coalitions in sectoral agendas. For example, grains. There's a challenge in terms of increasing the trade of grains, and increasing production. You see, global stocks are very low today, so we should really work on that. Oil seeds, pulses, animal protein. So several sectoral agendas could be worked together between Brazil and Canada. The WTO reform and the bilateral trade negotiations between our countries. I believe that we have an opportunity to have a trade agreement between Canada and Mercosur, and this is one of the countries that we are working together in terms of starting negotiations and doing things that could make our countries closer in terms of agriculture, research, sustainability, and several other areas. Research is one of the areas in innovation in general. See, genetics, biotech, mechanization, geomonitoring, geotechnologies, precision agriculture, big data, drones, blockchains. See, so huge opportunities here. I know that the next sessions of this event we will explore possibilities in terms of startups, and I really believe that we have a lot to do together in this area. Value-added products is something that we should work, and I believe that Brazil should also learn with Canada. Canada has a huge opportunity, a huge experience in terms of value-added products, branding. You see, exporting not only commodities but also moving to value-added products. Food safety, quality, and traceability is a huge point today. Brazil is today talking a lot about here on, for example, traceability of beef production, especially in the Amazon. You see the creation of deforestation-free areas and things like that. Sustainability, climate smart agriculture. and also the possibility to build integrated agri-food value chains to address global food security. See, agriculture is still a sector that we face a lot of restrictions to value-added products, and one of the ways to solve this problem is to increase cooperation between companies and moving from supply chains to value chains, you see, in global terms. So this is also, in my opinion, one of the possibilities that we have between our countries, and one of the possibilities that we should work together to address the global challenges in terms of food security and food safety. So thank you very much. I hope that I kept my time here, and I'm ready for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcos. This was a great overview of Brazil-Canada trade, and there's so many untapped opportunities, including like sharing best practices and collaboration. So really appreciate your presentation here today. We have one question to the audience. I'm not sure if how relevant it is before we call Paulo, that we usually handle into our like healthcare events, but is it comes in terms of medical cannabis and cannabis in general, and the production or the farming of cannabis. Brazil is now opening for medical cannabis. Canada is already like far ahead in terms of legalization of both recreational and medical. Do you believe import-export of cannabis between both countries is going to increase, or do you see this as an opportunity? It's not totally in agriculture like focus, but do you see any opportunities in there?
I have no idea about that. Because we are...
Yeah, we will. So just to give you a little bit of so for our audience here, we do have, and I think Paulo as well, further ahead into the event can give a little bit more information on this. If I'm not sure that there are any exports, I think it's final products, yes, but I'm not sure Brazil is allowing the plantation of cannabis. But
no, Brazil is not allowing yet.
Yeah, it's not allowing yet.
So of Canada and US here in Brazil is not allowed. There are some research that some companies are doing with some research centers here. For example, here in Unicamp in Campinas, they are trying to select varieties that would be good here for Brazil, but there's nothing in commercial terms yet.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, like there are some discussions in terms of the final product and oils and all of that, but in terms of the agriculture part of cannabis, there's still no, at least for the near future, everything's still being negotiated. So stay tuned for like next healthcare events as well. And Gustavo, if you wanted to add something in there, because I know that you're involved as well into the cannabis.
Thank you, Caroline. That's a great question. I do want to highlight that phenomenal opportunities, very meaningful today. Number one, Canada has invested a lot of money and engagement with governments on the regulatory side. So traceability is very important. And I think that's an area of cooperation between Canadian and Brazilian developers, farmers, and those that are in what we call the production stage, or the manufacturers, those that go through the distillate process, or that use different kinds of processes to develop Delta 8, Delta 9, and others. The next area is on best practices. So before it gets to a point where you can actually ship products and all of that, the best practices on extraction and respectful engagement with farms, traceability, and from farm to user, not farm to market. So we're seeing that the US is probably the #1 global leader on that space. Canada is very close. I think Canada and Brazil can actually do some tremendous work together.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Marcos. And again, thank you, Marcos, again for your presentation. Really appreciate having you here. I know you're a fan of Canada, and we hope to work closer to you in the near future to help develop those untapped opportunities between Brazil and Canada. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today. Our next speaker, I would like to invite then my co-MC, and also who is going to share a little bit of information on a market research that the CCBC has organized or has provided in terms of untapped opportunities and future trends on Brazil-Canada trade. So with us today, we have Paulo Castro, Paulo de Castro Reis, Chief Officer of Institutional Relations and Business Affairs at the Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá, the CCBC, based in São Paulo, to do a quick presentation on Brazil-Canada future trends for agriculture. So Paulo, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. Hello, bonjour, boa tarde. I'm very pleased to be here with you all today. I'm very pleased to be here. CCBC is based in São Paulo in Brazil and have also an office in Montreal, in Canada. With a team of more than 60 people, we work every day to promote trade and investment between Brazil and Canada in both directions. Now, I'd like to talk about the Brazil-Canada trade in the agri-sector. When talking about the Brazil-Canada trade, oops, just a second here. Yeah, okay. When talking about the Brazil-Canada trade in the agri-sector, it is interesting to point out that there are many opportunities that go beyond the usual products and commodities that are shown in the top 10 list of imports and exports between the two countries. Here at the CCBC, the Chamber of Commerce Brazil-Canada, our business intelligence team have prepared a multi-sector market study to help identify those opportunities. The main question to be answered was, what do Brazil and Canada already trade, but not with each other? Or that could be traded with the more added value. The study considered 250 selected harmonized codes from 24 categories of products, taking into consideration the products that Brazil and Canada are already importing, but not necessarily from each other, and crossing that list with those products that each country is exporting, but also not necessarily to each other. This way, we were able to identify real opportunities that will contribute to diversify the bilateral trade in different sectors. There are great opportunities in niche areas, such as fresh fruits, frozen and dried berries, cheese, jam and jelly, fish and seafood, cocoa and chocolate, honey, maple, juices, bakery products, nuts, sauces and spices, pepper, wine and spirits, pet food, and various other gourmet products. The study offers specific information about tariffs and regulations, financial trade data, sector analysis, market size and potential, considering retail value and volume, and national company share, including main buyers and competitors. To share this study, we have created a specific website and published 2 books, Brazilian Opportunities for Canadian Exporters and Canadian Opportunities for Brazilian Exporters. CCBC has also a foreign trade committee that hosts various events to create awareness and generate interest about those opportunities. Besides, we're organizing trade missions and B2B rounds to promote business interaction between importers and exporters of both countries. Today, travel and many other activities have been canceled and restricted. Everyone, including ourselves here today, is confined into our own homes. And one of the only things that we are doing now is eating and drinking. And we are all willing to indulge ourselves by tasting new products. During this pandemic times, we have noticed an important increase of the demand for new experiences, new flavors, new terroirs. Brazilian and Canadian importers are aware of this trend and are all looking for new products and new suppliers. To help in this process, it's important to promote virtual business rounds, such as the ones we made last month for Brazilian food and beverage exporters to Canada, or next month, the one for Canadian food and beverage exporters for the Brazilian market. To conclude, I would like to point out that the potential of the Brazil-Canada trade in the agri-sector is enormous. The potential is enormous, and there are lots of opportunities for exporters in both directions. It's up to us now to identify and share those opportunities so that we could all benefit from the full potential of this bilateral relationship. It's important always to remember that Canada is not in the top of mind for the Brazilian exporter, and the same way as Brazil is not in the top of mind for the Brazilian exporter. That's why it's so important events like these ones. And I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to participate in this event today. And as I hope it will help to inspire companies and institutions from both countries to work in this same direction. In the following panel, we will have the chance to hear some examples of Brazilian and Canadian success stories of some of those niche markets. So now I would like to introduce the panelists of the next panel, Niche Opportunities, Success Stories, Lesson Learned. For the moderator, Carolina Albernaz, CEO at Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. And I would also like to invite Marcelo Correia, CEO at Marcelo Correia Consulting, Flávio Ferreira, CEO at BR for Trade Corporation, Rob O'Sullivan, Vice President of Sales for the Americas at Clearwater Seafoods LP, and Sidney Bratt, General Manager of Gourmand Alimentos. Carolina, welcome back to the floor.
Thank you, Paulo. So first of all, I'm extremely happy to be here today with all of you. I mean, we've been listening for the last hour or so about all the opportunities and the niche opportunities between Brazil and Canada, and specific products and alternatives that exist. So I know that Lígia mentioned a little bit of the niche products that we're going to mention here today. We had Marcos as well mention a little bit, Gustavo. And the objective of this panel is actually to go through actual success stories, so we can hopefully inspire some of the members of the audience today to continue looking for opportunities between Brazil and Canada in a majority of products. So just before I actually start with the questions and ask for my panelists to do a quick presentation, we all know that both countries are very, very strong into the agricultural sector. There's many untapped opportunities, especially for niche products. Brazilian exports of food and beverage to Canada had a growth during 2020, reflecting, of course, the exchange rate and a greater receptivity of the Canadian market to Brazilian products that goes beyond the traditional coffee and sugar mentioned in the past presentations. When we're talking about Canadian exports to Brazil, we saw a small decrease during the last year. Also, again, impact of the exchange rate, but giving its status among the top 30 global importers, Brazil's importance as a market for Canadian goods continues to grow. So Brazil has a wide and varied group of financially resilient consumers who maintains consistent demands for premium products, which differentiates them from other demographics. They seek out innovative flavors and single origin or imported items, as well as products that provide unique experiences, as Paulo mentioned as well. those wealthy consumers in Brazil have specific purchasing characteristics and will pay more for high-end products. And that again come the very receptive Canadian brand, as Marcos mentioned in his presentation, right? Canada does that very, very well. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. And I'll just ask our audience to, if you have any questions during the panel, please add to the Q&A session, and I'll make sure to incorporate them during the questions to our panelists. Without further ado, I'm gonna ask our panelists to do a quick presentation, a 3-5 minute presentation, introduce themselves before we go to the questions. So why don't we start with you, Rob? If you can just introduce Clearwater Seafoods and talk a little bit about your experience with Brazil.
Thank you, Carolina. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. You know, one story I'll start with. It's kind of nice to have Canadians and Brazilians, and sorry if there's somebody from another country here, but people ask me when I go to Brazil, what are Brazilians like? I live in the US, but I'm dual citizen from Canada. I always say Brazilians remind me of Canadians. Kind, caring, personable. So that connection is also there. I'm glad Paulo said niche opportunities for us. On some of the charts that I saw earlier, seafood doesn't even register from an export or an import perspective, and we're one small niche of the whole seafood platform. So Clearwater Seafoods itself is the world's largest harvester of wild-caught, sustainably harvested shellfish products. So we specialize in things like scallops, lobster, clams, shrimp. We have fisheries in Argentina, as well as Canada, Argentina, and Scotland. And we started selling into Brazil about 15 years ago, our sea scallop species, frozen at sea scallops. And the reason we went to Brazil, we're selling into about 40 countries now, between Asia, Europe, and North America. Our business is split pretty evenly, 30 to 40% for each region. And Brazil has the largest, many might know this, the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan. In Sao Paulo alone, I've heard different numbers from 2,000 to 3,000 sushi restaurants just in Sao Paulo. So our products are consumed in most sushi restaurants around the world, very heavily in Japan, North America, and other parts of the world. And we saw Brazil as an opportunity to sort of dive into that niche. From a success perspective, you know, we had one partner early on that built the business in Sao Paulo, but then we learned after 5, 6, 7 years that sort of plateaued, and they had their good customers, and it wasn't really growing from that point. So we identified a couple of new importers. We're now dealing with 3. Now, we have other importers calling us saying, hey, we'd like to import your products, but we recognize that might cause problems for our partners, and we see our 3 importers as partners. And the new partnership allowed us to get in not only deeper into Sao Paulo and the Japanese trade, but also into Rio and Brasilia. So the 3 biggest markets are now getting our products. If you look at Brazil and sort of the median income and the middle class, you might say, is Brazil your target for Clearwater? But if you look at the top 1% in Brazil, it's easily a target for us, right? It's a 200+ million population. The top 1% want good quality food, and they're willing to pay for it. I remember when I started selling into Brazil or was managing the Brazilian sales team, the real was close to 2.5 to 1, and we were selling in US dollars. We now know that's over 5 to 1. And over that time, our sales have grown. So that niche of consumers that are willing to pay for a premium product is absolutely there. I'll go down on a business trip, eat in a restaurant, and the meal will be twice as expensive as what I would eat in the US or in Canada, and the restaurant's full. And our sales continue to grow. Again, this is a niche product targeted at mostly Japanese consumers or Japanese restaurants, but now it's finding its way into Italian restaurants and other fine dining, French, etc. So yeah, I think from a return perspective, Brazil has always offered us as good or better return than any of our sales in Europe or Asia. And that again is with the currency devaluing by almost 100%. So we're very, very pleased with where things have gone. What I would say so we sell sea scallops, a little bit of lobster, North Atlantic lobster, and a little bit of a clam called hokigai, which again is a red clam, goes on sushi nigiri topping. From what we've learned, we learned that you have to have a partner in Brazil that knows how to cut through the red tape. We again deal in over 40 countries, and Brazil has arguably got the most red tape out of all of them. and having somebody down there, whether it's a good importer that can walk you through those or a direct sales rep like we have, we found it super beneficial if any headaches come up, crossing the T's, dotting the I's on the import paperwork. Understanding the state-to-state sales taxes. So our importer might buy it and bring it into Sao Paulo and then ship it into Rio. They're paying taxes through that whole way. I don't profess to know exactly what or how they're doing it, but having somebody in the marketplace that can explain that to you to understand what they're going through and what they need to include in their pricing is important. So I think beyond that, I'm trying to think, Carolina, if there's anything else.
We'll get into the questions later.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, this is great.
That's the quick and down and dirty.
Yeah, no, this is great. Why don't we go to Marcelo now then? Marcelo, if you can introduce yourself, a little bit of what you do to our audience, please.
Thank you, Carolina. First of all, it's an honor to be here in this panel, in this forum. And also I thank you, the Chamber and the Camera, for the invitation, and also for the sponsors to make this forum feasible. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and my company, I started the company in 2012 as a decision that my wife and I took to stop working around the world and settle in Canada. The kids were here, and that made the decision easier to come to Toronto and stay here for, I think, forever now. The company, we started the company in 2012 with the focus on more on my previous business was more on the electronics side, high tech. And then when I got the first opportunity to work with the fresh fruits, I got passionate for that. And today I have 80% of my time dedicated to promote fresh food. Basically what I do is I'm not a broker or a middleman. I just try to develop new business for companies, Brazilian companies that want to export to Canada, and also some Brazilian producers, small and medium-sized producers who already have exports to expand the market into the Canadian, in Canada. Just a few slides. If we take this. So doing a little bit of research, I discovered that the promotion of Brazilian fruit was done back in the 40s and 50s with this lady, who we all think that's Brazilian, but it's Portuguese. And then what we see here is that from the head and from the hat of Carmen Miranda, we got everything to the ground. Instead of having the fruits in the hat, to have fruits in the containers, in boxes to ship that. And from her idea, her vision, we have make it real to promote the Brazilian fruits. I'll start with the first one, with the fig. Fig was the first fruit that I brought into Canada from a producer in Sao Paulo. And we sent the first container to Vancouver at that time. This was about 3 years ago. And now, just to have an idea how the business is growing, in this season now, in this safra, now we have about almost 70 tons of figs being already exported to Brazil. And we do this selling into the three main cities, of course, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, all come by airplane. We have restrictions now. We didn't sell more because we have restrictions on the air freight, on the air availability of space in the airlines. So it kind of restrained. But anyway, we got, comparing this season to the previous one, we did a expansion of the export. And we also did a lot of melons from the northeast. So it's from the Mossoró region in Rio Grande do Norte, where we export containers. Now, in this year also, we succeed in having containers not only to the East Coast, Toronto and Montreal, but also to Vancouver, which had a bit of logistic problem. Other item that we did a lot also was mango. And here I refer to Lydia, because this exporter that did the first export of a container from mango is Smart Fruit that she mentioned in her presentation. So just, I don't know if it was before or after us, but we did their first export to Canada. And the fourth fruit that we have here is the atemoia, which is a fruit that not anybody in Brazil knows, but is very successful in Canada. It comes by air. and we're also selling it in the 3 main cities. Other fruits that we are working with is we did persimmon, the famous kaki, about almost 100 tons of kaki we export this year. We did avocados, butternut, limes, and also we have some garlic, another producer of figs, sweet potatoes, and the piel de sap is another variety of melon from the Northeast. What I say that every fruit, when we do export to Canada, and when we achieve the to export is a success story. There's a success because it involves a lot that we have to do with the grower to adapt the packaging, to adapt the color, to adapt some details, the labeling, which is not very complicated, but we still have to work on that. So, and I think that it's a good story to have the Brazilian small and medium-sized growers exploring Canada. Still, there's a lot to do. Now, the competition in Canada is fierce. We compete, if you have the US and the Mexico right beside us, and you have to face this competition, which is not easy, but we are growing. We're growing step by step, we are growing, and I see that we still have a lot of potential to do in marketing the fresh foods in Canada. I think that's just for introduction, Carolina, that's it.
Thank you, Marcelo.
And, wait for the questions.
Thank you, Marcelo. So now moving on, before I go to the questions, and we have questions for all the panelists, we have a couple common questions for everyone as well. We'll go to more like the ready to market product. So Flavio, if you wanted to give us a quick intro on yourself and BR4Trade, please.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for being here. Really a pleasure. BR4Trade started 11 years ago. We started in 2010. And since then, we started importing frozen Brazilian products. Started with the famous pão de queijo, the Brazilian cheese rolls with Forno de Minas, and then the natural evolution to bring other frozen products such as açaí products and frozen fruit pulp or fruit purees. And that's what we do today. We have a bit of import also on dried products. And we've been dealing with customers here in Ontario and Quebec, which is the heart of the consumer market in Canada, where the largest population is, but we have partners all over the country. We are always looking for new opportunities and possibilities, and this being an agribusiness forum. I'm glad to say that we are working with a lot of different manufacturers of cassava-based products. We have now in the pipeline 3 different brands that will bring innovative products from Brazil based on cassava. So I think that's going to be quite interesting, and I trust the Canadian public will receive them well. And that's what we've been doing since we started. We think that close collaboration with other partners here in Canada are of utmost importance, so that we have national distributors, regional distributors, logistic suppliers such as Mellowhawk, which is our main partner on the logistics side. And we are always looking for new opportunities, not only here in Canada, but also in Brazil. We already started with a few initiatives in Brazil, bringing Canadian products there. We have a partner there that's helping us on this initiative. And I think that will be a wonderful avenue to explore.
Thank you, Flavio. Thanks to you, I can enjoy my pão de queijos here in Canada for sure. And then Sidney, last but like with you, a little bit of, you can just give a little bit of an overview of Gourmand Alimentos and your experience with Canada.
So just to tell you a bit about, tell everybody a little bit about my company. It was founded 31 years ago with only one aim: importing over the world and distributing those. And that in the beginning, very quickly, we focused, I focused on Canada because I was very interested in a few products which were not known to the Brazilian public. So I started with maple syrup. Of course, maple was not a known product in Brazil, so we had to do a lot of work to make it known. And it was not easy at the beginning. Today, well, everybody knows in Brazil, most of those who consume it, they know what it is, how it's done, and like it very much. I mean, we have been doing a very good business with maple for the last 25 years at least. But it's not easy. I mean, working with Brazil is not easy. Together with maple, I also started working with a brand of biscuits and other, I would say, other products from a company called, which is now called Dare. At the time, it was called Culinar, and then it changed and was acquired by Dare. And they have a very large variety of biscuits and cookies and so on. So we tried that basically with biscuits which were not manufactured in Brazil, so we cannot bring into the Brazilian market similar products than those which are produced here, because we would never be able to compete against them. And because there's a big problem in taxes. So when you ask about Brazilian duties are not that high. They're something around 20%. But then on top of that, you have 5 different taxes, which for most food products will come to 100% landed cost. So imported products become very expensive in Brazil, very, very expensive. So we reach basically 2 to 3% of consumers, which are the ones who can afford to pay those prices. Because if you take the price in Brazil of any imported product and you compare it with the price at the origin, here it will be 3 times more expensive. So it makes it very difficult to the people in general to consume, because they don't have the means to pay those prices. So we really target a very small percentage of consumers. And then there are other big problems. One of the biggest problems we have is the freight. Logistics from Canada to Brazil are very, very complicated. Basically, the only port you have on the Atlantic Ocean is St. John, New Brunswick. But from there, we don't have direct vessels to Brazil. 0. So what we have to do now is it's a transshipment in the middle of the way. So in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, wherever. So the product leaves Canada, goes to a middle port in a way, waits for a vessel which comes to Brazil, and then it's charged, it's put on the vessel again and comes to Brazil. So first of all, it's very expensive. And second, it takes more time to bring a product from Canada than it does from China. It's amazing, but that's a fact. So it's a very long trip. It takes something like 45 days, while from New York it takes 2 weeks, 15 days. And here from Canada, we have to wait between 40 and 45 days for the goods to reach us. So it's very complicated, it's a very long trip and very expensive. 2 years ago, I was in a mission in Canada, which was directed by John Kirkup, who's probably listening to us right now. And we discussed this very long, and we talked with the authorities from the port of St. John and so on. Everybody said, yes, we're looking for a solution, we're with this and that. Well, 2 years went by and absolutely nothing happened. So we still have this huge problem. I don't know the other way around how it works, but from Canada to Brazil is very, very challenging. And well, it increases the cost, it increases the price of the product, and that's very, very bad. So we should be able to find I mean, I guess that there's not a very big traffic between Canada and Brazil, so vessels are not very interested in doing this this kind of trip. I don't know exactly what the problem is. But I can tell you one thing. I mean, I've been several times to Canada. I love Canada. I've been everywhere a bit. And I'm sure that there are lots of Canadian products which would be interesting for Brazil, would be very well accepted. Basically, products not similar to the ones we have here. But that's then there's another problem, is pricing. With your dollar, which increased a lot in relation to the American dollar, to the Brazilian real, and so on, prices became very expensive from Canada. So that's why I stopped bringing products from there, for instance, from Culinar and there, because on one side it became very expensive. On the other side, Brazil industries started copying those products and doing the same thing here, which are with a much lower cost. But what I say is that what I think is that perspectives exist. They are very big, but Canada has to do something in order for that to happen. It's not just the good wishes that will do anything. So first of all, Canadian products in Brazil, Canada in general, and Brazil is not well known. And this is very important. Years ago, 20 years ago, Canada did some actions in Brazil in supermarkets and this and that. So for a small amount of time, there was a knowledge and people really went for it. But that was 20 years ago. Since then, nothing happened. And the visibility is very important. So nobody knows about Canada. Nobody knows about the quality of Canadian products. I can say because I know I've been visiting lots of factories in Canada, and I saw what quality was. But again, there's no promotion. There's nothing to state that Canada really does produce fantastic products, and they're available. For instance, even spaghetti. When you talk about spaghetti, you think what? You think Italy. But very few people know that the Italian spaghetti, some of the Italian spaghetti is made with Canadian wheat. So the quality of the Italian spaghetti depends on the wheat. So, but this is not known. No? I would say the mustards coming from Dijon are made with mustard seeds from Canada.
Yeah.
If it were not for the mustard seeds from Canada, Dijon wouldn't have mustard. So, but who knows that? What kind of information Canadians have done in Brazil to make these things known. So we know that the Canadian product is fantastic, is really much better than most. Canadian mustards are as good as Dijon mustard because it's the same base, and so on. There's so many products which are produced in Canada, which have the same quality as the main manufacturers. But what kind of promotion does Canada on the Brazilian market to inform the Brazilian public about that? How does the Brazilian public know about the possibility and the quality and whatever Canada does? Nothing happens if you don't have a visibility on the product, if you don't show the product, if you don't make a promotion with the products or some sort of action to show that Canadian products are very good. And then on the other side, and this is my particular experience. Canadian at all. They go to the States and that's it. Their market is America. If they go beyond, they go to Mexico, perhaps, but they don't know South America. They don't go to South America, and they're not even very interested in working with South America. I have some very good examples, and John Kirkup can confirm that. When I was last time in Canada 2 years or 2 years and a half ago, he settled some meetings for me with some manufacturers in which I was interested 2.5 years ago. So I went, I liked the products, they showed me the products, they gave me samples and so on, but never replied an email. That was it. I was there, I was very well received, but then they never showed any kind of interest to go on. My emails were never answered, and I'm talking about more than 2 years ago. And until now, I don't have any reply. So they don't seem very interested.
It's
or
always,
they don't know about. I don't know. I don't know what the problem is, because it has always been. Excuse me?
It's what we call the bad boyfriend syndrome. We can
Well, I don't know. And this is not new.
Yeah, but no, thank you very much, Sidney. I appreciate.
Yes, well, talk to him.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments here.
My pleasure.
With some questions now, like Rob, you've been doing business with Brazil for over 15 years, and you found a specific niche there. There was mentioned in your introduction, the Japanese restaurants, right? And that's how you started increasing your volume. How do you see the market opportunities for the Canadian sea products in general? I mean, talking about scallops and lobsters and shrimps as well in the future. And how has the market evolved since you started?
It's a good question. I'd probably go on for a little bit. My quick answer is there's plenty of opportunity for quality products in Brazil. I would say on shrimp specifically, there are some barriers to entry because of Brazil's big shrimp industry. In fact, I don't think you can even, I'm not sure you can bring any shrimp in, but the rest of the sea products. So we're growing our lobster business. The lobster 6 months of the year in Brazil, we're the other 6 months. Hoki guy, which is our surf clam. So salmon, as we know, there's a lot of salmon that comes in from Chile, a lot of seafood consumption in Brazil. From a per capita perspective, it's growing at or faster than many other countries. So yeah, plenty of opportunity. I would argue that if you're going to bring in something that's price competitive, you might have a challenge just because there's so much available. Some of the niche areas that we're playing, I think that's where the real opportunity is, both on pricing and some volume.
Yeah, somehow you have to compensate the difference in exchange rate and the price of the product, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
To that.
I keep saying it can't get worse though, Carolina. I keep saying this is as bad as it's going to get from an exchange rate perspective. I believe that now.
The Canadian dollar went up a little bit this week, so.
There we go. Good. Oh, the Canadian dollar or the Brazilian?
Well, it's getting worse for the Canadians. I'm trying, anyway. But and what are the main challenges? You mentioned like finding a partner. You gave some advice already, but what were the main challenges that you faced when you started 15 years ago, and are the same challenges now?
Yeah, it's really about regulations and ensuring that you're working. Again, the embassy helped us, the Canadians on the ground there, and our importers, and getting the paperwork right. We missed a couple of T's that we didn't cross, and we had containers that had to wait in Brazil. So you want to make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Really, the regulations, some of the red tape that exists in Brazil are the things that you want to spend your time on and make sure that you're paying somebody to make sure that there's no errors. So that's the same as it was 15 years ago. I'm not sure it's any more efficient than it was. We just know how to circumvent it a bit better than we did from the original days. And that's because we have people on the ground.
No, this is great. So moving to Marcelo, since we're talking about products right now, Marcelo, regarding to the fruit, like in your case, you've been helping, as you mentioned, Brazilian small and medium fruit producers to enter the Canadian market, right? We know that the volumes are slow, but there's a lot of really good opportunities in the future. What is needed in your perspective? What is needed to grow the Brazilian fruit export to Canada?
Well, I'll say in general, it's the mindset. It is the lack of knowledge of the Brazilian medium and small size growers, what the Canadian market is. It's a market that's much easier easier to do business than any Brazilian can think of. It's an open market, which means that you have competition from all over the world in Canada, depending on the season. Have European competition, have Middle East competition, have American, Mexican competition. There's absolute no red tape when you compare to Brazil. You don't have to cross any T's as Rob has to do in importing to Brazil. It's very easy. Just an example, when you import some fruits by air, it flies from São Paulo at night. It arrives in Toronto 6 o'clock in the morning. By midday, it's already clear for customers, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's in the supermarket. So the red tape is minimal, and everything is done electronically, which makes it very easy. And other issue that's very important in Canada is the low risk. From all my experience in financial risk I'm talking about, from all my experience in Canada, and the Brazilians are not used to this, the risk of not receiving your money is very, very low. And I didn't have any experience on this. Everybody paid on time, what was done, and if you had any issue on the quality of the fruit, it was discussed. But at the end of the day, everybody got what was on to the grower. And last but not least, it's a beautiful country. Come and see Canada. It's a beautiful country, and you're going to see a different way of doing business, a different way of people, how they treat you. It's very friendly, and of course you have a different culture, a French culture, and like a British culture. Although the Canadians don't like me to say that, but it's a beautiful country, and you can enjoy being here and doing business with Canada. It's very, very easy, and the market is good.
And in your experience, what are the main, if any, what are the main, except for the mindset that you mentioned, the main roadblock and challenge that you face opening the market for Brazilian figs and melons, that were kind of like your two biggest cases there?
Yeah, the issue is more on making the Brazilian grower understand that the quality is a key issue. Now you don't try to send second category of fruits, because that doesn't work in Canada. And understand that for you to be in Canada for a long time, you have to understand that you're not selling the food, you're selling a service, something that the Canadians need, and that you have to provide a good food, but you also have to provide an after-sales support, and have to be close to the customer to understand what they're doing. And I think this is the issues that most, in the beginning, the grower does not understand. But as we move along, we have now, during the season, that some importers just want to buy the fruit from that grower that they had experienced before, and which means that we are also working on the branding. When they put up a box with their names on the box, and the customer knows, okay, well, I bought this box last year and I want this box again because it was good, I didn't have any problem, it sold well. So it's a series of actions that the grower has to understand, that we are in a new market, a developed market, a very competitive market, but we can win, and we are doing this. We are expanding the presence in Canada, although of course it's not comparing to the big agribusiness, but we have this niche markets that we are in it, and this reflects on the people that we keep in Brazil in the rural areas. And also one thing that's important, I think goes back what Marcos mentioned. We are dealing now with the second or the third generation of growers. Now the father came from, in the fig, as I always like to have the example. The figs are mainly Italian, from Italy, from Italian origin. And now we are the second generation, or third generation, where the sons and the grandsons are much well educated. They know what's technology, they know what they have to do, and they deal directly with the customers to get what's the best practice in the sector they're trying to input in their business. So I think it's like a evangelization, sorry for the mispronunciation, of the grower. That's a good market. It's not, you move from Brazil to Canada as a new market that you have, and it's a good place to be in.
Perfect. Thank you. So Flavio, you now Canada, I mean, you've been very successful into bringing a lot of Brazilian products into Canada for the past year. So Canada is a very multicultural and diverse country. Canadians are used to trying new flavors, new foods. As you mentioned before, you successfully introduced Brazilian brands to the Canadian mainstream market so you're moving from what you called Mercado da Saudade, so the market that is destined for the Brazilians living here, into now getting into the big chains and serving those products to the Canadians. What did it take? Can you give us a little bit of a short, how was your process to do that? And if you can share a little bit of your secret there with us.
Well, it will take more than 5 minutes, but
if you can do in 5
basically
minutes.
You have to be very humble. I keep telling my supplier partners in Brazil that when you come to Canada, and I think any other market, right, you have to leave your high heel shoes at home and come with your Havaiana flip-flops to the table, right, to understand what the market demands. It doesn't matter if your product is really successful in Brazil, it will not be the same here in Canada, because Canada, as you mentioned, has a large multi-ethnic population, and these people are used to different flavors and tastes and colors. You have to understand how to get their minds and their hearts, and that takes time. With Forno de Minas that we started 10, 11 years ago, it's been a long, steep hill, but we are getting there. Forno de Minas already have 5 different products with Canadian packaging. That means that it's not only English and French, but also all the requirements of the CFIA. And that's most important. And I can tell to both Canadians and Brazilians in this panel, imagine if you go to a supermarket, it doesn't matter if it's in Canada or in Brazil. You can go to Loblaws or you can go to Pão de Açúcar, right? And you find a product, and the product has a very nice packaging, very nice picture, looks like a cake, but you don't understand anything that's written there. And then you look and then you turn around, oh, there's a sticker here, right? With a nutritional table and ingredients. How nice. That's it. Will you buy that product? You got to remember that your product and your packaging is your outdoor at the point of sale. So you got to be prepared, very well prepared, to have the correct packaging and the correct colors, correct details to be successful. So that's one part. And the other part is the education of the public. You asked about the key, right? Before the pandemic, we used to do a lot of samplings in supermarkets. And that's key to bring the products to the Canadian public. We have to understand that any consumer has a limited amount of money to spend in a supermarket. So you got to get that your share of wallet, of his or her wallet. And you're competing not only with other cheese rolls manufacturers, but you're competing with Chinese similar products like wontons and pierogies and samosas and empanadas. So you got to be good, and that takes time, and it does require a lot of patience in educating the public, right? So I hope I didn't take too long to answer your question. I apologize if I did.
There's so many other questions I have for you, and because it is really a success case, and for the Brazilian companies, I mean, you are able now to enter those products into the main supermarket chains. For the companies in the audience that are here with us that are looking to start exporting their products to Canada, what would be the steps that they need to take to do so, in your opinion, regarding like market fit certification, local partners? So what would be your advice for those companies with ready-to-go products looking to do?
First of all, open mind. Be open to hear something different of what you're taking and absorb it. You need a good partner right here in the market, somebody that understands the market. And I'm not talking only about my company, but there are a lot of other different companies that do that. It's really, really important, right? because you cannot really understand what's going on here in Canada, sitting in your desk in Sao Paulo or Rio, right? It's like Rob mentioned, you gotta hire somebody there in the field to get things moving. And it's the same here. So that would be my second suggestion. And third, be ready to invest because you're gonna need specific packaging and you need to follow the laws of the country, meaning that you have to follow CFIA guidelines. So that's most important. So 3 items here that I suggest new companies to Canada will follow.
Perfect, thank you. I know that Sidney mentioned a lot of the supply chain disruption as well. So I'm gonna actually ask, and in interest of time, like as a question to all of you guys, and it's gonna use as an introduction to our next discussion as well. We know that like if there's a lot of issues with Brazil-Canada supply, and the pandemic has disrupted international supply chain as in a whole, right? Many importers and exporters are facing issues such as lack of equipment, as Marcelo mentioned, lack of space, allocation, port congestions, increase on freight costs, unexpected costs that just come in, and many, many others. How has this impacted your business? So let's start with Rob, and then I'll go around with everyone. Or if it has impacted our business and how.
No, it has. We've had to babysit more of our containers than ever. And, you know, we're not a huge player again. We're, you know, half dozen containers a year, but we had some, I think maybe it was Sydney talking, somebody was, or Marcelo was talking about out of St. John. We ship out of Halifax. It goes down to Norfolk, Virginia. And we found out 8 weeks later, it was still sitting in Norfolk, Virginia. So we learned from that. We had to babysit our shipments more than ever, right to the port, and communicate that with our customers. And they in turn had to, you know, make sure that they were talking to the government regulators and all that sort of stuff. But without question, in the last year, there's been more challenges with respects to, you know, staying on top of it. That's really sort of the lesson for us.
Improving anytime soon, or is there specific for like the medium?
You know, I don't know. Containers in general, the East Coast is better than obviously what's happening in the West Coast. California has containers backed up for, you know, weeks and weeks and weeks. It seems to be getting better, Carolina, but we expect it certainly for the next 6 months to have a backlog, no doubt about it.
Tuned for our next panel with the experts discussing this. So
there you go, perfect.
Marcelo, what about you? Like how has this impacted you? We had some conversations about it, so.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of impact, especially on the air shipments, because some of the fruits they have to come by air, like the fig, like the temoya, and we have a reduction from daily flights to 2 flights a week that we are now. And sometimes we have a surprise that last week we had 4 flights. So everybody was running to get some space there. So on the air shipment, we had a big impact. We could do much more if we had the regular flights as before. On the sea shipment, we did have some impact, but not so much, as Rob said, on the east side of our coast, we could manage some containers, but we still had some difficulty in having containers available to ship to Canada, but was not as critical as on the air freight.
What about you, Flavio? If you can, how was the impact for you?
Well, it was quite strong. We had delays. My last shipment from Brazil of frozen products, it took us almost a month to find a container. So it's really, really a challenge. So now what we are doing is to try to plan ahead as much as possible, like increasing a month or 45 days the orders to Brazil, so that not only the orders are ready at the factory, but we are starting to look for containers and spaces in the ships coming to Canada well ahead of time, so that we can really scout the market for the reefer containers that are really very scarce nowadays.
What about, so Sidney, I know you mentioned that this is a problem for you. In your opinion, has this getting worse during the pandemic? What is your experience with the supply chain?
Well, the problem is the same that we were facing years ago. Of course, to this problem added the fact that there are very few containers available. So China is getting all the containers and nobody else has containers available. So added to the logistics, which are very complicated from Canada, we still have a problem of lack of containers. It's much worse, but I don't understand what would be the problem for one of the important lines which serve Canada to come to Brazil. There's really so little volume that it doesn't pay to have a normal line, at least once every 15 days or something like that. That would be ideal, because today it's terrible. I mean, a vessel coming directly from, let's say, St. John or Halifax or whatever, coming directly to Brazil, it would take 20 days. So today it's 45.
Yeah.
If we get the container, of course, otherwise it's even worse. Yeah, so it's worse. It became worse because of this lack of containers.
Yeah, no, for sure. So
so let's try to find a line which wants to do this.
Yeah, we need first to start increasing the imports and exports, and then we'll call the shipping lines and see if there's enough volume for them to send a ship directly to Canada. I think, but that's why we're here. So if there's one last, before we move on to the next discussion, then if there's one last advice that you could give our audience, if you haven't said so yet, Rob, let's start with you. Like, let's preach the preacher here.
Stay healthy. I don't, one last piece of advice. I think Brazil offers plenty of, they call it the land of tomorrow.
That's right.
That's going to happen. Trust in Brazilians. I love the country and the people. So anyway, we're behind it. We're going to continue.
He froze.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Marcelo, for you?
Well, just as I said before, keep an eye open in Canada. It's a good country to do business with. And for the newcomers to this market, please use the chamber in São Paulo, the object chamber in Toronto to do your first approach. I think they have a lot of information to support you, your first thoughts on coming to Canada, and they can be of a big help and answer all your first questions about this market.
Thank you, Flavio. For you, like, I'm gonna ask you specific advice, right, with all the experience that you had. So if there's a Brazilian company specifically looking into moving their products to Canada, what would be the steps and what would be your main advice for them?
I'm going to add to what I already said. One thing that I forgot to mention previously, that certifications, the right certifications are really important here in Canada. So gluten-free, non-GMO, organic, those are quite important. So I would recommend to invest some time in exploring those, and also have an open mind to what's coming. You're going to learn a lot once you come to Canada.
Thank you. And then Sidney, for the Canadian companies looking to start exporting to Brazil ready-to-market products, what would be your advice to them?
Well, first of all, I must say that the Canadian products are top quality. Everybody has to know that. It's not your usual quality of products. The qualities are really top. Second, they must know a little bit about the Brazilian market to be able to offer products which are not already on the market, which are not being produced in Brazil. So they cannot offer the same products which we manufacture here. They have to offer something unique, something different. That's my main advice. But prospects in Brazil are huge, and the Canadian products are great.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're talking about the 1% that Rob mentioned at the beginning, right? If we're talking about specific niche products, we have about, like, I don't know, 10% of the Brazilian population today with like a very comfort level of income. We're talking about 20 million people, right? So it's almost half of Canada. So there's definitely...
No, I'm sorry.
Look, he's like, no, 1%, 2 million.
Not right, not correct. I'm sorry. We would love to have 10% of consumers, but we cannot reach 10% with the prices of imported goods. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Our target is always between 2 and 3%.
So we're talking there about like between 2 and 6 million people, still like a lot of consumers there to have access to high value and,
yes.
and niche products, right? So I'll just before I
Definitely.
finish, I'll just like to ask our audience then, if you are a Brazilian company or if you're a Canadian company looking to enter and to explore opportunities, please feel free to connect with us, connect to the CCBC in São Paulo. We will share the presentations and the information, the contact from our speakers as well. Feel free to connect with them. I'm sure they'll be able to help you. And as I can give like as a summary of what we're discussed here, I think it's basically have a local partner, have someone that knows the market well and that has already the connections in the network, trust like your price, and do some research for market fit. And there's definitely a lot of opportunities between Brazil and Canada for niche products. So thank you everyone again for your participation here today. We really appreciate, enjoy you being here with us. And I would like to then now invite our next panel to join us here today as well. So with leading to Arnaud and talking a little about risk mitigation and logistics roadblocks. So we have here with us today Arnaud Mello, President at Mello Hawk Logistics, who will be our moderator, as well as we have Shannon Blanchard from Port St. John, cargo developer at Port St. John. We have John Kirkup, sales marketing manager at DN Logistics. So we have John Kirkup here, and we have Bruce Rogers, executive director at CIFA, who will do a quick, who have like discussion on the logistics impact. So guys, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you to the BCCC, to the CCBC for this invitation, and to my colleagues on this panel. My God, I'm so lucky to have you. Bruce Rogers, Shannon Blanchard, and John Kirkup from Brazil, so thank you. And before we start, as you know, supply chain and logistics has suffered tremendously last year and this year due to the pandemic. And as you know, you need logistics and supply chain to move your agricultural products and your manufactured goods. So logistics will always play a critical role on product movement, but with the pandemic on the third wave, how this has been affected by COVID. So this panel is going to discuss a little bit about this. So I'm going to start with my dear Bruce Rogers, Executive Director of CIFA, the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, who does an amazing job keeping all of us freight forwarders in Canada in line with regulations. So Bruce, thank you so much for being here. And
Arnon, I want to thank you and thank the Chamber as well. It's an honor and privilege to be speaking with you today. I don't know, could everybody see the material, Arnon? I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and it just gives you an overview of what CIFA is, the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, who we are and what we do. Our mission is to represent and support members of the Canadian International Freight Forwarders industry in providing the highest level of quality and professional service to their clients. We have three main pillars in the association that we focus on. The first one being membership. We are the escalation point for our members. Any items that they have difficulty resolving, whether it be with a carrier, a port, customs authorities, they usually escalate to our office and we intervene on their behalf. Just go on. The second one is education. We have a fairly large education component, and we train and develop the freight forwarding group within Canada. We also have our material that is presented in Canadian colleges, and we also are outreaching beyond Canada and providing traditional freight forwarding educational material. The last one being advocacy. We advocate on behalf of the freight forwarding industry with government. We also this year have hired a lobbyist, and really to improve our relations with government regulators overall, and making sure that our voice is heard and that they are aware of the issues affecting supply chain within Canada. Our membership, we have 260 regular freight forwarding members, and these are freight forwarding companies in Canada. They have 588 branches within Canada, and the employee group that they represent also is about 12,500 people that are employed in these freight forwarding organizations. The majority of our members they're split pretty well, I won't say equally, but 55% we would classify as small type operations. These are companies that have less than 25 employees within their organizations. The mid-size are 25 to 100, and that's about 25% of our membership base. And then anything greater than 100, we would classify as a large, that's 20%. And these are the large multinationals that we represent overall. In addition to that, we have 142 associate members. And these are individuals and companies that support the freight forwarding industry, such as carriers, being highway, the ocean carriers, the airlines, port authorities, railways are also members, as well as anybody else that really touches the supply chain, are members of our association overall. Our education, as I mentioned, we offer certificates in international freight forwarding through two main programs that we have designed. In addition to that, we also train, we have a program called the FIATA Diploma, and we are part of FIATA, which is the Federation of International Freight Forwarders, and we offer the FIATA, we present the FIATA Diploma through our educational material. We are in the business colleges within Canada, training on customer service, sales, and finance. And we also have what we classify as a professional freight forwarders designation, or our PFF. We offer compliance-based training on all the dangerous goods within the that are required by our members. And then we also provide workshops and training materials on anything really affecting global trade, such as standard trading conditions, Incoterms, letters of credit, insurance, whatever is required. Lastly, our advocacy, as I mentioned, we do reach government on any issues that are really affecting the supply chain overall in Canada, and we inform our members of really what is happening, what's occurring, and again, as representing the freight forwarders, we hear first what's going on, and we present that to our membership base overall. So Arnon, that's a very quick overview of what we do.
No, Bruce, thanks so much. That's amazing. And what most people probably watching this presentation doesn't understand the role that CIFA has on the freight forwarding community in Canada and on business overall, because the courses you mentioned, which CIFA is such a visionary on this, spending millions of dollars, right, on education. It goes not only to freight forwarders, but to any company doing business internationally. So anyone can take a CIFA course, right, Bruce? They can do DG training, they can do letters of credit training, and of course you have prices for members and non-members, but I think education is such a pillar for CIFA.
It's a significant pillar for CIFA, and thank you for mentioning that. And our material is all online, so it really can be taken anywhere by anyone. The only drawback we have right now is our course is delivered in English, but it is we have de-Canadianized it. It truly is a global training program for anybody interested in global trade.
No, yeah, it's amazing. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about how much CIFA does on the background to help Canadian companies and freight forwarders on this pandemic, right? So which is a major issue right now. So thank you, Bruce, so much. I'll move on to Shannon now, and then I'll come back to questions to all of you, okay? So thank you for that. Shannon, darling, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Again, on a panel with you. What an honor. My God.
It's all my pleasure, trust me.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Everybody can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I wanted to talk a little bit about supply chain and risk mitigation in light of some of the situations that we're faced with from a global perspective. I wanted to touch on today, a few key aspects, but really bringing the Port of St. John back into the mix, and explaining how we can actually play a role in helping you as an importer or exporter mitigate some of those supply chain concerns. So, I know that this has gone over, many times throughout the various panels that I've been listening to today, but I wanted just to touch on one of the biggest impacts within our supply chain has been the pandemic. And looking at bilateral traded opportunities, both from Canada and Brazil bilaterally, I wanted to point out that if you look at the 5-year historical trend for bilateral trade between the two countries, it has actually maintained a pretty healthy level despite the challenges with the pandemic. So looking at 2019 to 2020, the Canadian exports within the agricultural and seafood sectors remained strong at $77 million on the export side. A wide variety of products, you know, at a high level, not getting into the specifics that others have today, but really highlighting that that has remained strong throughout the pandemic. And also on the Brazil export side, same, you know, we're looking at $198 million throughout the pandemic, and still focusing on, you know, the key 6 sectors that, you know, we're seeing in the agricultural and seafood sectors in particular. So just wanted to kind of paint that healthy picture of bilateral trade within agriculture and seafood, despite that major supply chain challenge that we've seen. One thing I wanted to note, also within the pandemic year, with a focus on building and growing and sustaining that growth for bilateral trade, in particular on the import side, Port of St. John has been very successful at leveraging opportunities, developing promotional partnerships, and also being a facilitator of trade, but also the integrator within the logistics chain. And over the course of the last year, throughout the pandemic, on the import full side of our container growth, we've seen 350% growth. We've gone through many changes. I know in the last panel, there was some references made about Port of St. John, our abilities in connecting in particular with Brazil. And I really wanted to challenge Sydney on some of his comments, and the fact that we have been increasing our diversity, we have been positioning our growth with our infrastructure, and we have been diversifying in our container service options. So I really like for Sydney to reach out. I'm sure you still have my coordinates from your mission to St. John, and I'd really like to take a second look at that for you. Now we talk about how Port of St. John is positioned to assist in some of these supply chain disruptors or some of these logistics chain challenges that we've been up against. And a few things I wanted to mention, and I talk about them you know, at a collective logistics chain perspective. The Port of St. John is sort of, I would say, the conduit of anywhere between the importer, the exporter, and the logistics partners that we have with our terminal operator and our inland providers by road and rail. And in the entire space of that whole logistics chain, you know, the Port of St. John has remained strong throughout some of these challenges. There was made reference to situations on the West Coast versus East Coast congestion. We as a port have remained fluid with smooth turnarounds on both the import, exports, and our connectivity into our further hinterlands into our inland markets throughout central Canada. We also provide competitive options for those connectivities inland for our importers and exporters. We have 2 Class 1 railways now calling the Port of St. John, with both Canadian National and Canadian Pacific. We also have the excellent road connectors to allow for that flexibility within that logistics chain connection into the inland markets. And also, as I mentioned, we have been diversifying in our container service optionality, and in particular with Brazil. You know, while we have 2 carriers calling Brazil in particular, one of the lines, CAM-CCBC, has diversified and now offer 2 services going into the Brazilian market and positioned for growth. We want to continue this 350% growth opportunity through the Port of St. John. And we're partnering with our federal government as well as our provincial government. And we're just in the midst of expanding our capacities for future position for this opportunity and growth, and really looking at partnering with our logistics chain providers to ensure that we can sustain this growth moving forward. Sorry. Now, I wanted to touch, and I didn't have this originally, but I wanted just to reference our northbound and our southbound transit times with our 2 carriers, CAM-CCBC and MSC, just so that you have clarity on what the transit times are like. Looking at northbound, we're not in the 40 plus days, we're actually in the 20 and 30 plus days now that we have some diversity in our connections. And our southbound, we can connect anywhere between 23 days in Manaus up to 43 days with Swat Bay. But if you're looking at the Port of Santos, we're at about 30 days. So just to give some clarity and perspective and painting the actual picture of what our marine connectivity looks like through the Port of St. John. And before I close, I wanted to mention and really highlight the fact that we are the connector, we are the facilitator of all of the logistics chain partners, but I really needed to stress the importance of a freight forwarder and any of the logistics chain optionality and looking at that piece. Really, you know, we have DN Logistics in Brazil, really connected well with Canada, and on the Canadian side, Mellow Hawk Logistics really positioned nicely and understands the Brazilian market. So I really wanted to highlight and stress, if you're not experienced, you need to have a freight forwarder to be able to build that relationship piece with, so that you can actually not worry about all of the requirements of getting your goods to and from in between the two countries. Looking forward to the discussion.
So Shannon, 350% growth, and we know that you've been so active and so present in promoting Port of St. John. So I want to know, is there room for more growth, and what do you give this growth and to? Is it communication? Is it St. John's Port's going to be the darling port of Canada coming up even more and more? What is it? What do you attribute this success?
So the big piece, Arnon, is our positioned and partnership with our logistics connectors. So it's the marine carriers, it's the terminal operator, it's the inland provider by road and rail, really ensuring that we act as a team and not in silos. And that even goes from a business development perspective. While you see me here today, on another webinar focusing on another country in South America, you may see a representative from, CP or CN, and really sharing that message collectively. We as a port have been very active with Brazil. We have developed relationships for promotional partnerships in our target markets, and Brazil being one of our primary target markets, to be able to work directly with shippers and receivers and allow for that facilitated conversation to happen, and also to assist in looking at the cost analysis, looking at converting your supply chain. I know it was mentioned, a better transit time in through New York. That's a whole other point I'll talk about later. But looking at not using a US port, using a Canadian port for Canadian imports and exports, changing the whole supply chain and focusing on building a Canadian solution for Canadian trade. And with that, the Port of St. John, as I mentioned, is investing $205 million into our infrastructure to support that growth. And we are, in the midst of it, and we're planning for even future growth after 2023 when our project's completed. We're continuously looking at diversifying our service options with container services. And this year, this week actually, I'm happy to promote a new service that we're connecting with a new liner, not necessarily with the Brazilian market, but diversifying our service optionalities again. So yes, we do have that ability, and we're super excited for that growth.
Amazing. I just find it that it's so amazing that a freight forwarder or any agent can communicate with you. We had, of course, a few years ago, some issues on delays on communication, and you came in and you helped us bridge this gap with the carrier, right? And we solved our transiting for our containers coming in through the Port of St. John. And that was amazing. We were never be able to do that so fast, right? Communicating with you instead of going through CIFA sometimes, where many concerns of freight forwarders in a high level go to CIFA, and CIFA, of course, is a mediator in a lot of cases with the government or some issues that are happening in a particular port. But with you has been so easy to communicate. So congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So now we're going to go to John Kirkup in Brazil. Hi, John. How are you? Director of Sales for DN Logistics. So tell us, how is Brazil? We know the world is disrupted, and we know South America is getting to see that disruption even more now in a few past weeks. So how are things, John?
Thanks, Hernan, and thanks BCCC and CCBC and the sponsors, and nice to see Shannon and Bruce there. Before going to the Brazilian situation, I just want to go step back, Arnaud, and explain to everyone. Basically, I've been in the shipping since 1987, and I've served all my life nearly working for shipping lines, the last one being NYK line, the Japanese line. And in 34 years, I've never seen such a situation like this. But in the past, we did see something similar. If you go back in 1980s and 1990s, shipping lines like Ibaran Lines, Transrail, Sealand, we were having conference services. And the conference services were tariff-based shipping lines who would give you the same rates, same tariffs. And those rates at that time were about, for example, from Asia to Brazil, $8,000 for a 20-foot, $10,000 for a 40-foot. So the higher rates, they did exist. And they existed because of the conference lines. But in the 1990s, Europe and America, they started going against the fixing of rates. The fixing of rates suddenly were out. And then the war, the bigger this market share and the fuller the vessel was, no matter what, started decreasing the rates. And that led to what? Led to what we are now. And where are we now? We're with only 8 major lines. We have 3 consortia now, 2M, the Alliance, and the Ocean Alliance. And these 8 lines basically control the services nowadays. So I think people have to understand that the rates were high one time, and the shipping lines lost a lot of money. And I can leave the question and the provocation on the air there. Were the rates too low? Maybe yes, the rates were too low. That's why we had so much concentration, and that's where we are now. We don't have so many options anymore. So it's a debate where the rates should have been or shouldn't be, but I think that's important for us to understand. And just to give you a little flavor there, the daily hire of the ships nowadays for one of the service going up North America, a major carrier for Canada, we had a good conversation last week, and they were telling us that the daily hire for a ship of this service a few months ago was $15,000 a day. And at this moment now, they have a $35,000 a day daily hire. So how can you, in one day to the next, have such a high daily hire increase? So that's why also shipping lines are pushing, because the demand is so huge. We're having a demand, everyone's buying everything, everything is opening in the markets. And we're buying as ever by staying at home also. So it's a conjunction of a lot of demands which result in where we are now. And the situation in Brazil, just to conclude my thoughts here, are chaotic, as we've seen in Asia and Europe, but now it's hit Brazil. This is a reality now. So we have lack of containers. I've heard some of the traders saying we have another term, rollover rate. There's a Project 44. It's a platform where they make statistics and tracking, and their April numbers, the April report, were out of 10, 4 containers were rolled over in the world. So that means rollover, it could be 1, 2, 3 vessels. So that's another part of the equation there, which Brazil is facing, and it's very serious. MQCs, which are the RFQs contracts, our MQCs are not being honored. So you have a contract there for a year, and shipping line just saying, sorry, I'm going to give you 10 containers and that's it. I'm not going to give you any more space. So that's another problem. And the spot market, now their shipping lines are working on the spot market now. They don't want to work on the contracts. So they reduce the contracts and work on the spot market. And just to give you flavor, they're on rates for Canada. We're already hearing rates of $5,000 to $6,000 to Canada per 20 foot. And these are rates double of what we were hearing before. And there are no space in June, a few space in July. So the scenario is that. Obviously, I want to give good news, and I do have good news and good news. But
oh my God, I hope so, because we need good news for everybody who's listening. But
yes, we do. We do have good news. But just to end my bad news part, there's another important point which we can't miss. We had a lot of hacking into carrier shipping systems, and that's an issue. We had problems with CMA. We had problems with Maersk. We had a lot of vessel claims. So the vessels are getting very big. And when they have a fire on board or a very, very tough a hurricane or something, we get thousands of containers being blown in the water. And the last one is the Suez Canal. You know, big ships are having problems to go through the Suez. And we can't forget the COVID, our poor sailors. You know, the sailors are stuck on board for a year and a half because they can't get off. So the scenario is that. But the good news, we do have good news, and we'll discuss that.
Okay. So John, the bad news on lack of container and equipment, is it when you talk about the prices were they too low? And so is it just for the prices to be this high now? Or it's an aggravation caused by COVID? Of course, we know that because everybody's blaming less routes or skipping ports or less equipment. All of that combined, does it justify the price, for example, of 10,000, 13,000 a container from China to Canada last week? We heard from our agents, and now you're saying from Brazil, it doubled or tripled the amount of freight. So what is it? Was it too low and now it's fair, quote unquote, or is all due to COVID?
I think it's both, Arnaud. It's COVID and also the rate issue, where the conclusion is we can see a lot of shipping lines were bought out. They couldn't survive. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of both, indeed.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I can't wait to hear the good news. So Bruce, now to you. As we know, advocacy for CIFA, it's something major. So can you tell us what role CIFA played in helping Canada and its freight forwarders and customers overall in this pandemic? I know a lot of people don't know how much work you do in the background, as I said. So I want you to share a little bit of all the letters, all the fighting and screaming for us in Ottawa and across this great nation of ours. So tell us.
Right, and I appreciate that very much. And sometimes it's good to stay in the background. You know, like we don't like to brag about what we do, and you know, we just represent the industry. Well, I guess first and foremost, when the pandemic hit and the government put out the word that essential service workers were able to continue operations, the government really doesn't understand the term freight forwarding. They don't understand the term, and as a result, they didn't represent the freight forwarding sector at all. So our first piece of business was to lobby hard with government and really make them aware of the role that the forwarder plays overall in global, especially within Canada, and equally get them to recognize freight forwarders as essential service providers. So first and foremost, that was pretty key to us. Other than that, Arnon, it's everything to do with what's transpired over the past in Canada over the past 18 months. We've had, you know, we had a Port of Montreal strike in two separate instances, one in the summer of last year and one most recently a month ago. And from that perspective, Canada, CIFA lobbies hard with government and really makes them aware of how essential that port is to our operation overall. I know Shannon did a phenomenal job as far as recovery and assisting through that period of time. Primarily last year when that strike was fairly significant and took a long time to recover, the efforts of St. John were significant. But again, CIFA lobbies on that behalf. In addition to that, we will lobby on all of the other issues that are affecting supply chain, especially on the ocean side of things when it comes to demurrage and detention. I know we're not talking about that at this point in time. We're talking about rates, but all in all, demurrage and detention is a fairly significant portion. We align ourselves with the FMC out of the US. We've lobbied provincial governments out in Western Canada, just making them aware of the situation at hand. The last part we get involved with is at the global level. Again, from a Canadian perspective, we are somewhat small overall on the whole global stage. So we do participate in all of the FIATA committees. And FIATA, we just had a working group today on a C working group, really talking about the protection for the SMEs and what's happening today with the rates that John just explained. What was happening on from that perspective? How do we get that protection in for the small to mid-size? The larger forwarders have a voice. The smaller ones do not, and that's a greater role that we have to play overall. So I'll just cut it off at that point in time, Arnon.
Oh my God, all the topics you mentioned, we could be here for the whole afternoon talking about them because they're so crucial. And when I talk about advocacy that CIFA does, it's more, that is a true word, that what CIFA does, but also there is a lot of exchange of information between CIFA and the Canadian government that represent CIFA representing the voice of the freight forwarders and the concerns that we face when Canada sets up a new program like e-manifest, you know what I mean? And all these details. So CIFA is there and it's asked by the Canadian government and CBSA, you know, what can we do here to facilitate things? So I believe it's not only a request from CIFA, but there's also the government coming to CIFA and recognizing the importance of the association in bringing concerns of freight forwarding industry, the consumers, the buyers and sellers, and bringing all of this to play in Ottawa, right? And not simply having, for example, some countries that impose logistics restrictions or customs restrictions, and there is no association to talk, right, with government. And I think in Canada, we're so blessed to have CIFA that can communicate at all the time, not only when crises arise, but also on the daily basis, what makes our lives easier here, ports and terminals and freight forwarders and clients. So it's amazing. And there's so much more that you can do, right, Bruce?
Yeah, there is, and thanks for bringing that up. I you know, that's taken us a little bit outside of the the pandemic that we're dealing with right now. But you're right, we are a sounding board. The government does come to us on a number of issues that are affecting trade. We're in so many of their they call them the BCCC consultative committees that we represent. All of that, we represent the marine, the air, the road, the e-manifest, whatever else is going on. We sit on all of those working groups and offer our opinion on how that affects trade overall and how we can get improvements, which is more importantly is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and good results at the end. So you mentioned Port of St. John, that how much they did and helped, and thank God Port of St. John was there during the Montreal strikes last year and this year. So Shannon, to you, I mean, yeah, thanks for being there, because we heard, ships that we had containers coming to Port of Montreal and then they would divert it to Port St. John, and Port St. John really was able to handle the volume, right? It was incredible that you must have worked 28 hours a day just to get that done. And all of us, the forwarding industry in Canada, thank you for it. So how it has been?
How has it been? Well, with regards to kind of looking at the pending strike that we thankfully were able to not have to be faced with again, we, as well as many people within the logistics and supply chain environment, including the forwarding community, the importers and exporters, really planned early and really looked at what could this look like, what are the impacts, and how can we best take the opportunity to help and make it seamless. So it was really looking at having conversations early on, building out the plans, ensuring that we weren't taking too much on all at once. And luckily for the Canadian logistics and supply chain, we didn't have to act on that plan. But we did have a full plan in place, in particular with our terminal operator, DP World, working alongside the lines and the rail providers to ensure a seamless operation would have occurred had there had been a full strike.
So teamwork all the way.
Absolutely.
It has to be, right? So John, to you now. So I want to hear the good news that you promised earlier. We have a few minutes here, but so tell me, what is the good news? Is it the volumes in Brazil are, the containers are going to come from China and they're going to, overflow the market with all the containers we need to come northbound? Is that the good news?
Yes, that's one of them, absolutely. But I think they are simpler. I think simple and out-of-box thinking is the way out. And the idea to give you a few examples, man. And basically, and as Shannon said, anticipate shipments. Okay, using models, you can easily identify if you can stock before. Use the slack season. Use the backhauls of some of the shipping lines. I think that's the strategic going, at least for 1 or 2 years, instead of facing the GRIs and the peak season surcharges. During the peak season surcharge, where we see peak season surcharges at $1,000, $2,000 per container, and GRIs at $1,000, and things, and there's no control. You better start looking already for the next year to anticipate, try and load. For example, the slack season from Brazil to North America to Canada is December, January, February, March. When we in Brazil on holidays, we are out in the carnival, in the summer, in the beach, in the New Year's festivals. That's when you start shipping your extra volume. And why not use the FTZ, an FTZ system which St. John has, where you can stock things there and then release them as you go along. Invest in manpower there and get benefits and taxations from the government. Think out of the box. The just in case rather than the just in time. Sorry, at least for the next 2 years is the word. You've got to think ahead. So the other point is the routings also. Giving an example of St. John, you can route Calgary, you can route, just not Toronto, Montreal, but you can go to the West Coast from St. John. You don't just have to get to St. John through the Caribbean. You can go through St. John on this new service, which Shannon has just told. It's going through Tangier, through the Med. So that's out of thinking. And Hapag-Lloyd can give you a rate from Santos, Tangier, St. John, Montreal, Halifax, or whatever. So why go and force your routing through the trade lane, which is fully booked until the next 2 months? Why not go through maybe Mediterranean trade where there's more space, or the European trade, the ships? And answering Sydney's question there, my number one dream is having a direct service into Canada. And trust me, the place where the ship will go to Canada will be St. John. Why? Because they are the lowest and the closest port going south. Yep. So if you look north to south, there's no other port in Canada closer to us.
Nautical miles, right? That's what Shannon talks about all the time, which is amazing. So if you look at the map that we see doesn't really represent, right, what the distance are. And people are, oh my God, but it's so far east. Really? Is it closer? But if you look at nautical miles, which I don't work in that industry, but I believe you, it's closer, right?
Yeah, and the world is round, so it makes sense. I'm not being biased here. It's just I'm being realistic, and being realistic is changing routings. And routings you can also, by routings I mean intermodal. Why not take it to St. John and then use CN Rail or CP Rail 53 footers and then take it across the country, drop it on the first port you can and then ship it. That's another way. And don't forget about the rural ships. Don't forget about break bulk. Don't forget about bulk. These are other options you can also use. And we will see a lot of cargo migrating to the other modes. But just to conclude, I think that the good news here, when I wanted to finish off, is that since 2014, we had never had so many orders in the books for new ships. So that's a good light in the tunnel since 2014. So just to give you numbers from this year, and this is based on Clarkson's, a very known brokerage firm. They control number of ships, and Alphaliner, also very good referencing. We have 526 orders on the book year to date. Out of these 526 ships, 218 are box ships, are container ships. And remember, we are on this new mega VLCC super post-Panamax ships. So that means big ships. And out of these 218 ships, 57 are LNG. So they're going to be running gas, natural gas. So that's good for our sustainable side. So the good news is that we have new ships coming in the line. It'll take a year, they say, but 2022 will be a good year. And I think and on Brazilian side, for the Brazilians to think in how to reduce their costs and be more competitive, we're having a boom on the rail. You know, the intermodal rail systems in Brazil are being revived, and this will shortly reduce the cost of internal logistics in Brazil for our exports, and this will be a game changer in the next few years.
We're dreaming about that for years now, John. So they better get to it fast, right, to get the product to the coast. Thank you so much.
Arnon, do you mind if I just jump in on that one?
Of course.
What John has talked about the container ship, which is an excellent point, and bringing extra capacity into the market is ultimately needed at this point in time. The problem is going to be with the infrastructure when it comes to the ports, and can we handle it? Can the rail handle it? And we talked about it earlier, all the supply chain, and Shannon really talked about the partnerships and the integration between all of the players. If we're not all aligned, we're going to fail again. And again, we can add a bunch more capacity on the ocean, but if we're not prepared inland to handle it, we don't have the infrastructure, and we don't have the rail, it's going to create a significant bottleneck and just compound problems further. So it's very complex, as what was talked about in the previous panel. But it really is that partnership and integration between all partners in the supply chain to make this work.
Exchange of information always. That's so true. Good point, Bruce. So Shannon, what can people do? What Canadians can do to mitigate this scenario more and more than they're doing right now? What comes to your mind?
Well, I'm going to speak first and foremost something near and dear to my heart, and that's looking at alternative logistics chain solutions. Really, I know a couple of people have already touched on this, but building out the extra time, just in case, I'm just going to say it because, you really should have trademarked that when you came up with it. But, the supply chain disruption is sometimes hard to predict of when it's going to get better or get worse. So building time into your overall logistics chain equation is very critical, and it gives you the flexibility to be able to react to those disruptions. But also looking at building out alternative logistics chain options. The moment that you put yourself into a silo and doing things the way that you've always done, that's when you're going to get into a situation. So taking the time and investing in looking at what other ways can I look at getting my products to or from, the Canadian and Brazilian markets. So one thing I wanted to mention, traditional routing always took place through a US East Coast port, looking at the major population bases within Canada. So that's the way it's always been done. Does it have a 14-day transit time? Absolutely. Does it take 30 days to get connectivity between St. John and Santos? Absolutely. Is it longer? Yes, it is. But I'm going to tell you one thing. There are two variables that come out of the whole situation at looking at a traditional logistics chain. When you're using a US port, specifically in the agri-seafood sectors, any type of food grade product going through a US port, you're going to have to adhere to not only the CFIA regulations, the Canadian Food Inspections Agency requirements, as Flavio mentioned before. You're going to have to adhere to the FDA US regulations, even though the product's not going to stay there. And that can cost you money and time. In addition to that, going through a US port, good luck getting your inland connection by truck or rail with the COVID impacts and the congestion at the port. But also in addition to that, when looking at a US port, your product has the chance of being inspected by the US Customs, even though it's not going to stay in the US, costing time, costing money. If you go through a Canadian port for Canadian trade, you have one regulation for foods, you have one potential for inspection. And no, I'm not saying that your product is going to be exempt. It may be inspected. It may take time and it may cost money, but at least you know it only has the option of having it happen one time versus two. But even within the Canadian port scenario, building the optionality within. I mean, Port of St. John is the largest port on the Atlantic coast by volume, but there are other ports as well that you can look at. Port of Halifax was mentioned, Port of Montreal as well. But St. John is the only East Coast connection with multiple rail providers, with multiple connections with Brazil. Building out those multiple options builds out the supply chain optionality and reduces the risk. It's not just an insurance policy, guys. Like, you need to really take the time, work with the forwarder, build out a plan, and add the extra time to ensure that your shipping, receiving can afford the extra time for the disruption. It's critical.
Correct.
Call your forwarders.
Exactly. Exchange from the forwarders. The transit in US, you brought up a critical point, because people don't realize that in any product, but food specifically, we had clients that chose that route with their Brazilian supplier, and the container was stuck there for 3 weeks on an agriculture exam. And then it cost, I think, $3,000 for that exam, right? So 3 weeks delay, $3,000. At least if you had the inspection in Canada on the direct service, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours max, right? Then after 24 hours, you can call customs in Canada and say, please, what's happening with my inspection? And you get a dialogue, right? In the US, you can't make that call. You have to wait for that release to come through before you even action that container. So,
or you can just call me, right, Arnon?
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. Yes. I always call you. Don't worry. Like, I'm always there.
Happy to help.
Guys, if you had a crystal ball now for this year, because we're in June already and I'm shocked, you know, what is the perspective? And I also want to throw in there, have you heard that people are looking at closer markets to manufacture their goods versus the traditional markets? I hear that from my clients saying, you know, the just in case, just in time scenario is out of the question right now, right? It has been out of the question. So, and also they're thinking of buying product or manufacturing products closer to home. What you have to say about that? And if you had a crystal ball for this year, what's going to happen? Your final thoughts.
I'll start then, Arnaud. Thank you for that provocation. And that's the biggest challenge of trade nowadays going forward, is the going regional, buying local. You know, act local and buy local.
It's easy to say, but difficult to do, right, John? It's
very difficult to do.
But it's,
yeah, because
what the hell?
Some things you can't go local. It won't go local. You got to accept that. But I mean, that is a challenge indeed. But I think going forward, the way is to diversify, absolutely. And work on your supply chain and the suggestions we've been given. And one suggestion, which I also forgot, but I just wanted to mention, is the LCL. Instead of trying to book one container, normally the LCL cargo has a priority within a shipping line. So if your line is going to run out, if your product's going to run out, you know, try and get at least 1 or 2 boxes in an LCL, or try and put it on an airplane. You know, that's what way forward of not stopping and not losing the market. You know? But absolutely, the challenge will be for the trade is to try and improve and keep the logistics flowing and keep the products at the gondolas of the customers. And suggestions that we've given, I think they are very fruitful. Thank you, Arnaud.
Thank you so much, John. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Arnon. I agree with John. I think, you know, the supply chain of the past, the lean inventory, just in time, focus on growth, focus on profitability. That's changed a little bit now with what's happened through COVID, and you know, I think people are looking to nearshore. I'm going to say they're looking at it, but again, it's cost. There's a cost associated with it as well, and I think old habits die hard, And I think people will revert once we're back into some sense of normalcy, whatever that's going to look like. I think people will revert back. I think there's a cautionary tale there, and I think they'll look at it to a I'm going to say to a much lesser degree than what's being spoken about today is my prediction on that one. Back to the sectors, I think the air sector is not going to quickly recover back to normal. So I think we're, for the balance of this year, the next 12 months, we're still looking at freighter operations to a large extent. The belly portions will not return to what they were previously, and that's probably several years out at this point in time. And on the ocean side, the global perspective, my feel is this is going to continue at least for another 12 months. I think we're looking at near the end of 2022 before we start to see some relief going on, and it's based on so many different factors right now, but it's a lot of it's to do with everybody's changing habits. Like it's not necessarily the supply chain, it's what we're doing with the disruption that's been created, and it's the remote working conditions, and it's the e-commerce. And I was reading something on e-commerce that in the last 4 years it's grown by 21% in that period of time, but they're projecting now between now and 2024 it's going to grow another 49%. So the e-commerce is just going to continue to expand at such a significant rate. It's changing, the whole supply chain from what we knew it was to what it's going to look like tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. My God, there's so much there. Wow, and thank God we're recording this, because I'm praying that 2022 comes closer and closer so we can solve all these issues. So thank you so much for being here. Shannon, your final remarks.
Well, I'm just going to end by saying if I did have a crystal ball, I likely wouldn't be sitting in my basement. I'd probably be retired by now. However, I'll give it my first and best, I guess. So I think that it's best for companies to position themselves to be prepared for increased rates over the next 6 months. I don't think that that's going to change. I think that there's too many differing scenarios happening within the global logistics chain that are affecting and impacting those rates. And in some cases, transportation costs can actually represent more than the value of the goods. So it's really important, again, to work with the forwarder to build out what those costs look like and ensure you do your due diligence to ensure that your product can sustain a high-end cost throughout the next 6 months. If not, depending on the Incoterm, that's a whole other discussion. But depending on who is responsible for the transportation, it's going to remain high. And I really think that that's going to continue.
Great. So what I hear from all of you is that planning more than ever, it's crucial at this time. Planning with players in the market, freight forwarders, right? And a discussion, an open discussion, what do we see in 6 months from now, or even a year from now? So you can build in the cost of freight, which is absurd right now everywhere, into your product, and maintain your contracts with Walmarts and Costco's and all the big players that are consuming your product. Because at the end of the day, if you don't fulfill those contracts, big penalties, right? So it's unfortunate. So anyway, I want to thank you, my panelists today, for being here today. Bruce Rogers, Executive Director of CIFA, Shannon Blanchard, Business Development Manager Director for Port St. John. Thank you again. John Kirkup, Sales Manager for DN Logistics in Brazil, and all the team from the BCCC and CCBC for putting this event together. So thank you so much for having us.
Okay, thank you, Arnon. Thank you, John, Bruce, and Shannon. It was a pleasure to see you all here today in a very stimulating panel. It was interesting to see such a stimulating panel, and how it connects with the previous panels we had before, even the questions relating to the cost pressure and with the buying local. is very much related to the importance of finding niche markets where the value is not so critical and people would still be willing to buy. And at the same time, to focus on the new ways, as John mentioned, to go around the challenges we're facing today. And now I'd like to call Peter to present our next speaker. Hello, Peter, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Paulo. Tudo bem? Tudo ótimo?
Tudo bem, obrigado.
De nada. So I have the great pleasure of introducing someone who is actually very special to me. I'm going to be introducing the Honorable Margaret Johnson, who is the Minister of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries for the province of New Brunswick. And perhaps you don't realize I'm from New Brunswick. And that little province is actually punching way above its weight. And as you've seen with the people who are talking through the events we've had today, there has been some remarkable developments there. But one thing that New Brunswick has always produced is exceptional people. And I want to say that I've known Margaret for 45, sorry, 40, maybe, no, I don't even know what that is, but for a long time. And when she was elected, she was immediately made minister, and she comes from the Carleton Victoria riding, which is largely rural. It is farming, it is logging, it is some fisheries, and even beekeeping is what she's been sharing with me lately. And so she fully understands the agricultural situation. And in addition to that, she's spent her life being a teacher. And so she's also taught everybody. So she's well placed because she knows everybody. And she has spent a lifetime of fundraising, of supporting the little guy, but she also is in a riding that has a billion-dollar company in McCain's. So she knows the extremes from the smallest to the largest. And it is my very great pleasure to present her here to have some final words about New Brunswick and about the projects that she's been seeing. So Margaret, over to you. Thank you very much for being here. The Honorable Margaret Johnson. And we lost her. And I think she got a little shocked. So hopefully she'll come back on here. Well, then I'm going to tell a story, because one of the things that I found so interesting is even through high school, Margaret was always a leader. And she was, I was one of those talky people, but she was one of those people who got things done. And so she was involved in student government. She was involved in all the different things that we had in order to really sort of engage the student population, and then moving on from that, going on and getting her teaching degree and starting her career. And then what has really happened is she has become somebody that we should all aspire to copy. And so what's lovely about that is to get her to come and speak here. She actually asked if she could listen in, and so she's been listening in for the last hour just to hear what's going on. And so I'm really excited that we're going to have her speak. And also I'm really excited about what's going on in New Brunswick as well, because often when we talk about agriculture, we're talking about Quebec, we're talking about fisheries through Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and we're talking about Ontario, and then we're talking about the pulses in the prairies, and then we're talking about everything else that's going on in the West Coast. And people don't realize just what is available in that little tiny province, which is known for potatoes, and it's known for beans and soy and corn and so much more. And now she's going to be telling us the full story, which is terrific. And she's back, and we're delighted to see her here. Over to you. We would love, and thank you very much for bearing with us and sticking it out, because I know you're far away
I'm so
from
glad. Obrigado por se encontrar comigo.
Yeah, close. Bem-vinda, prazer conhecer. Go ahead.
Excellent.
Okay. Look, I'm really excited to speak with you today and to be part of the first Brazilian-Canadian Agriculture Forum, and I hope it's going to become an annual event. I want to give a huge thanks to my dear friends Peter and Arnon for arranging my participation. As the Minister of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries for the province of New Brunswick, I'm always pleased to have an opportunity to chat about these sectors with anyone who's willing to listen. I want to thank folks like Shannon for maintaining the Port of St. John as a vital part of import and export for the province of New Brunswick. Our province has a long and rich agricultural history. The agricultural sector is very diversified with more than 30 commodities, which include fruit, vegetables, beef, poultry, eggs, maple products, and we produce on a total of 2,255 farms. New Brunswick's agri-food sector has an extensive network of export markets involving 75 countries, including Brazil. And while we do export a few products to Brazil, there's certainly opportunity to offer more. We had great success last year exporting frozen French fries right from my neighborhood. And while we can expand on the products we already export, there are so many more high quality products we would be interested in sharing. This includes other potato products, frozen onion rings, shelf-stable seafood such as smoked herring and sardines, which coincidentally is where I am today. I'm in the southeast shore of New Brunswick, visiting with smoked herring smokers and lobster and crab packers. So it's apropos that I'm here with you talking about that. We also deal with animal feed, peat moss, fertilizer. In the agri-food sector, our growth sectors include wild blueberries and apples. And on the flip side, we're always willing to discuss importing quality agri-food products from outside of Canada. So in our aquaculture and fisheries sectors, there are opportunities as well, not only with food products, but with innovation investments. Participating in events such as this will allow our respective industries to explore opportunities and have discussions on how best to work together. Enjoy the rest of the forum. I'm sorry we had hiccups. I look forward to future conversations on how we can work with each other to increase our agri-food trades. Thanks once again to Peter and Arnon, and I look forward to speaking with them and through them to arrive at mutually beneficial arrangements with export and import. I appreciate your time and thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Adios.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Minister. We're very grateful. Thank you. Thank you for showing up, and I really appreciate you taking all the time. And what I love, did you hear all the products? Come on, blueberries. I had them for breakfast, and I bet you they were from New Brunswick. And so,
and the good
anyway,
news is that we have blueberries, and you have things like mangoes and things like that. So I mean, there's all sorts of exchange opportunities.
There totally is. There totally is. Anyway, Minister, thank you so much. We're very grateful. All the best. Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, everyone. So,
Paolo, thank you very much too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Paolo, and just on behalf of the organizing committee, I just wanted to thank again all the speakers today for their availability, for being able to take time of their schedule to be with us. I apologize again for the event being delayed. And just to remind everyone that we have 2 more sessions to go. One tomorrow, hosting the Brasil-Canada AgTech Trends and Opportunities, starting at 1:45 p.m. Eastern, 2:45 p.m. Brazil time, where we showcase Canadian-Brazilian ecosystem for technology, as well as overview of funding collaborations for SMEs. And then next week on June 2nd, we have our last session with sustainable agriculture in Brazil, where we showcase initiatives from the private and public sectors for sustainable agriculture and success cases of companies who are supporting the forest and the communities around it. So I would like to, again, Peter already thanked our sponsors, so I'll just pass the mic to Paulo for his final words, and thank you everyone again for being here today.
Okay, thank you very much, Carolina. Thank you, Peter. Thank you all the sponsors, partners, speakers, and participants. I think we had, as I mentioned, a very stimulating day with lots of discussions and insights. Of course, there are lots of challenges on the table, but I think we are all creative enough and motivated enough to think different ways and establish good and strong partnerships to overcome those challenges. Once more, thank you all for participating here with us today, and hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye, au revoir, até amanhã.
Thank you everyone, see you tomorrow. Thank you, Paulo, thank you, Peter.